careful what books you pick up in a library or a store, because sometimes they come with curses attached. Written in the early 1600s by Martin de Leon Cardenas, The Orphan Story is a novel about a young Spaniard who heads to the Americas in search of fortune. And while that sounds like every adventure story ever, there's a bit of an outlier. There's a bit of a darkness that lurks within its pages that led to the novel not being published until 2018. The first draft was a 328-page manuscript, slightly yellowed, slightly worn and aged, missing a couple of pages. Belinda Palacios, a Peruvian scholar who edited the book for 2 years, she was apparently warned by multiple people about it. So it was first set to appear in 1621 under the pen name of Andre de Leon, but never made it to press due to the presidential atmosphere at the time in Sicily. So the manuscript then sat in the Hispanic Society of America until 1965, when Belinda rediscovered it, and she learned many attempts to publish it had happened, giving rise to rumors that malevolent energy lurked among the almost 400 pages, causing the people working on it to, die. So in an interview she commented on the reported deaths, saying one was from strange diseases, another was a car accident, and something else. So Belinda had heard from other professors she was working with to publish the book. One of them specialized in colonial letters from the Andean regions and Mexico. This person went by the name of Raquel Chang Rodriguez. Now these letters describe how Antonio Rodriguez Monino and William C. Bryant both died before finishing their editions of the book. And that's why the manuscript is believed to be cursed. She's like, yeah, that's why this is taken so long to publish, because if you work on it, that's the end of your life. Okay, don't touch it. Most books would be happy with a gift card or dinner for their birthday, but Abramelin the Mage, or Abramelin, depending on who you ask, decided to give his son a book full of mythical curses. Yay! So this book tells the story of an Egyptian mage named Abraham, or Abramelin, who taught in a system of magic to Abraham of Worms, a Jew in Worms, Germany. The system of magic from this book regained popularity in the 19th and 20th centuries, partly due to Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mather's translation, which dubbed it the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. So ever since it was translated to English, this 15th century novel has had a reputation for being cursed. Now there are several theories why, but a lot of folks believe it has to do with the mage's belief that everybody has their own unique personal demon. And throughout the book, there are instructions for rituals and supernatural feats to bring your demons under control. So internally, the text dates itself to the year 1458, and the book exists in the form of 12 manuscripts and an early printed edition. Now the earliest manuscripts are two versions that date from about 1608, are written in German, while another two manuscripts are from about 1700 and 1750. The practical magic found in both Book 3 of the French text and Book 4 of the German tends to center around a set of talismans composed of magic word squares. These are similar to traditional magic squares, though the latter are usually composed of numbers, whereas these ones contain letters. Commonly, word squares are used as puzzles or teaching aids. So in the context of all of this, the focus becomes mystical, so each square should contain words or names that relate to the magical goal of the square. A parallel is found in the famous Sator Arapotenet Abra Rota's word square, an altered version of which is also found amongst these squares. So you combine a cursed book and math puzzles, and you get no thank you, moving on. I feel like calling something an Untitled Grimoire should be scary enough on its own, but allow me to elaborate. These manuscripts were believed to be written in the early 1900s, as their first library appearance was around the 1920s. The books originated when a Wiccan high priestess called Persephone Adrastea Irene recorded her family's spiritual history of being an American witch of Swedish and English ancestry. These manuscripts record Persephone's witchy history that she reworked through all of her adult life, incorporating her mother's grimoire into them as well. So the first book contains about 250 pages of spells, incantations, curses, and enchantments, as well as corresponding information on gems, planets, rites, potions, and even exorcisms. The second book includes about 150 to 200 pages of alchemy and chemistry recipes, cures, perfumes and balms, nerve tonics, and even hairspray recipes. So the first book is believed to carry the curse heavier than its counterpart, seeing as Persephone's spells are believed in Wiccan culture to contain more power than most other records due to the embodiment of herself within them. Originally the books belonged to Alice Montserrat, who moved to the UK in the 1920s to work with famed occultist Aleister Crowley. Later on they both went on to work with the Golden Dawn Order and printed their works and publications as occultism raised into the modern world. So even though Alice did little reporting on the cursed lore over these books, she did make notes as to why she and others within the order believed the curse carried some serious weight. She wrote an inscription warning all those who read it, saying, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further, or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hand of the craft." Now this was written not only in English, but other languages as well, because they were like, we really want to warn people, stay away. The Grand Grimoire Grimoire is a black magic grimoire, and different editions date this specific one to maybe 1521, 1522, 1421, but it was probably written during the early 19th century. Some experts suggest that maybe 1702 was when the first edition may have been created, and a Bibliothèque Bleue version, similar to a chapter book of the text, might have been published in 1750. I know, that's a lot of dates, I'm sorry. The introductory chapter was authored by Antonia Venetia da Rabina, who gathered his information from the original writings of King Solomon. So a lot of the material of this grimoire derives from the Key of Solomon and Lesser Key of Solomon, which are grimoires attributed to, you guessed it, the king. Also known as Le Dragon Rouge or the Red Dragon, this book contains instructions on how to summon Lucifer or Lucifuge Rofocal for the purpose of forming a deal with the devil. So the 19th century French occultist Eliphas Lévy, author of Dogmes et Rituels de la Haute Magie, claimed the contemporary edition of Le Dragon Rouge was a counterfeit of a true older Grand Grimoire. So the overall work divided into two books. Book number 1, it has instructions for summoning a demon, and for the construction of tools with which to force the demon to do one's bidding. Book number 2 is divided further into two parts. The Sanctum Regnum and Secrets de l'Art Magique du Grand Grimoire. The Sanctum Regnum contains instructions for making a pact with the demon, allowing one to command the spirit without tools that were required by Book 1, but at a greater risk. Secrets contain simple spells and rituals that you can employ after having performed the ritual of Book number 1. Some editions contain a short text between the two parts, known as Le Secret Magique ou Le Grand Art de Pouvoir Parler aux Morts, or in English, the magic secret or the grand art of being able to speak with the dead, which deals with necromancy. The book describes several demons as well as the rituals to summon them, just all this to make that pact with them. It also details several spells for winning a lottery, talking to spirits, being loved, making oneself invisible, and so forth and so on. This book mentions 3 greater demons, which are similarly prioritized in the Grimmorium Verum, and sidebar, in the English translation of the work, the demons are referenced by the more generic term of spirits, which is a term I know a lot of modern Satanists prefer. And finally for today, the Munich Manual of Demonic Magic, or MMDM, or Liber Incantatorium Exorcimorium et Fascinatorium Verum, is a 15th century grimoire manuscript whose name I totally just butchered. The text, composed in Latin, is largely concerned with demonology and necromancy. Richard Kiekefer edited the text of the manuscript in 1998 under the title Forbidden Rites, a necromancer's manual of the 15th century. Portions of the text in English translation are presented in Forbidden Rites as well, embedded within the author's essays and explanations on the Munich Manual in specific and grimoires in general. The Russian translation of this Latin grimoire was published in 2019, and the first English translation was only published in 2023. There is only one known surviving manuscript of the original manual, which is almost complete, minus the first 2 folios that describe the beginning of rituals. The rest of the grimoire contains complete instructions for the invocation of demons, such as Satan, Lilith, Aseroth, and Samael, as well as the supposed attainment of favors and supernatural powers. Some of the spells allow for, you guessed it, obtaining the love of another, achieving invisibility, acquiring wealth and treasures, or gaining knowledge. The text is accompanied by over 40 illustrations of magic circles and symbols to be used in rituals. You've got a list of 11 demons, similar to the ones from the Ars Goetia, and as you guessed it, most of the text is in Latin, minus a little bit of German and Italian.
Number 5 on this list is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. You may be familiar with this title because there was actually a movie adaptation that hit the screen super recently. Back in 2019, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark came out in film format. But this movie was based off of a book, and for the longest time, this book was super banned. SCMP says this one stands out on the list because unlike the other banned or challenged books, Scary Stories is not political and it doesn't contain any references to drugs or sex. So why were these collections of horror stories so controversial? Some of the stories could be pretty scary and parents felt that they were inappropriate for their children, which is fair considering these are stories about being buried alive, cannibalism, and way more. But for many people, the real issue was the artwork by Stephen Gammell, an incredibly talented illustrator who no doubt caused nightmares for thousands of children since the book's first publication in 1981. So literally, guys, this book got banned because it was too scary. Think about that for a second. The author literally did too good of a job at making a horror book that people thought no one should read it. If I was the guy who wrote this, then I wouldn't know whether to take that as a compliment or like a criticism, to be honest. The people who banned this thing couldn't hold it down forever though, because at the end of the day, it is some great literature for those who love horror. Number 4 on this list is Fire and Fury. Now, this one I felt like I had to bring up because it happened really recently with the former president of the United States. Skyscape says, Wolf's gossipy tell-all describes a dysfunctional presidency perpetually in chaos, zoning in at one point on the day the FBI director James Comey was fired. Comey heard about it on TV. Not all of Wolf's claims are accepted as truth, of course. Trump said he didn't authorize Wolf's White House access and didn't speak to him for the first book. Trump's lawyer Charles Harder sent a cease and desist letter threatening a libel lawsuit in an effort to stop publication. Fire and Fury sold out in its first day of a release as a result. By 2021, Trump was speaking to Wolf for Landslide, Wolf's third book in the trilogy. There were countless scandals during the Trump administration, so I feel like this one was just another notch on the belt. Either way though, the government literally did everything in their power to try and get rid of it and stop us from being able to buy it. The opposite happened though, and because it got so much attention, it flew off the shelves faster than they could print them. Number 3 on this list is Lawn Boy. This story, written by Jonathan Iveson, is one of the most challenged books in America in 2021, and honestly, folks, it really shouldn't be. Esquire says Lawn Boy is the big-hearted story of Mike Munoz, a young Chicano striver working on a landscaping crew in Washington. As Mike fights against the soul-crushing forces of classism and racism to achieve his American dream, he also comes to terms with his sexual identity. Though the novel was written for an adult audience, teens fell in love with Lawn Boy, leading it to be awarded an Alex Prize, an award bestowed by the Young Adult Library Services Association to books written for adults that resonate with teens. Critics slammed the book for the LGBTQ content and sexually explicit material, pointing to a sexual encounter between 2 young men. Iveson has received hate mail and death threats as a result of campaigns to ban his book, but he remains uncode. When I look at the wealth of great literature that enlightened souls have sought to ban through the ages, how could I feel anything but pride to be listed among them, he wrote. To those who would ban my book and burn me at the stake because they are ashamed of their own past experiences or uncomfortable with any non-binary sexual identifications, I hope you find healing. And literally, guys, shout out Jonathan on that one. When I found out that this book was something that people were trying to ban in literally 2021, it kind of blew my mind. Like, sometimes I think that the world is past stuff like that, and I do want to say that I think most people are. Like in America, 87% of people don't think that books should get banned. So at the very least, regardless of their views on things, they think that there should be a freedom of speech or writing. Either way, the government hasn't actually forbidden you from reading this book. People tried to do that. And I say, you shouldn't listen to them. Number 2 on this list is Animal Farm. So if you wanted to read Animal Farm now, then you probably wouldn't have too hard of a time getting your hands on a copy. But back in the day, this wasn't always the case. In fact, the government for a long time wanted nothing to do with the book. Spyscape says Animal Farm was a target of censors and spies. The satire revolves around farm animals who rebel, hoping to create an equal society. Instead, they end up living under Napoleon, a dictatorial pig. The USSR saw it as a critique of its politics and banned the book. The UAE briefly banned Animal Farm because of its talking pigs seen to be against Islamic values. The CIA, meanwhile, turned it into a propaganda tool and funded an animated movie of the same name, although spies changed the book's ending. If we think about it logically for a second, it makes sense why a government wouldn't want Animal Farm to get read by the general public. This is especially heightened when we think about it from the perspective of a controlling government like the USSR was. In their brain, they probably saw this book as a bit of a threat. The public reads it and then starts getting some sneaky ideas about how they're going to revolt and start their own new country with a totally new government. And then this even goes a step further because the CIA started pushing this book and marketing it as something against the USSR. What was a fictional story turned into this whole political thing caught between the two biggest superpowers in the world when it was released. And number one on this list is the Anarchist Cookbook. This book has had a roller coaster of a life since it was written. Big Thing says, since it was first written in 1971, much of its information is out of date. But some topics, like how to make improvised bombs, don't have an expiration date. The book provides instructions for making LSD and tear gas, primers on how to operate various firearms, how to sabotage different kinds of infrastructure, and writing on anarchist philosophy. The book was written by William Powell, a manager of a bookstore in Greenwich Village. Powell quit his job, however, to write the Anarchist Cookbook. My motivation at the time was simple, said Powell in an article for The Guardian. I was being actively pursued by the US military, who seemed single-mindedly determined to send me to fight and possibly die in Vietnam. Its countercultural, violent message proved popular today. It is sold in excess of 2 million copies. It should come as no surprise that the book is infamous and controversial, but the kinds of criticism it attracts varies depending on the source. Governments across the world clearly have a negative opinion of the book. It does, after all, advocate for violent civil disobedience. The Anarchist Cookbook is banned in Australia. In the UK, possessing the book, though not illegal itself, has often been used as evidence in terrorism cases. A teenager was accused of and later acquitted of a plot to assassinate British National Party members in 2008. In 2017, a 27-year-old who had traveled to Syria and possessed a copy was accused of being a terrorist. It turned out that he had merely printed a copy of the Anarchist Cookbook for use in a role-playing game in a university society. So clearly the government does not like this book at all. I think it's a bit much for people to be accused of certain things just by owning the book, but I also kind of see why it happens based on the contents of the text. Just be aware that if you pick this book up, then the government may start keeping tabs on you.
Number 5. The Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. The Book of Abramelin, or more formally, the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, is a Jewish magic text that is thought to date back at some point in the 14th or 15th century. Now, it wasn't this initial publication that gave it such a notoriety. There wasn't really a lot of book reviewing going on back then. It was when it was upheld by the 19th and 20th century magicians who made up the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which kind of sounds like a fake bad guy from an RPG, but is a British secret society dedicated to the practice, research, and upholding of old occult magic ways. Can't be that secret though, because I'm talking about it. One of the founders of the Golden Dawn, one SLM Matters, created the first ever English translation of the book in the 1890s, drawing from a 17th century French translation. Mathers' translation became the definite magic text of the 19th century, eventually helping inspire Aleister Crowley, the legendary occultist and fixture of one of the best Ozzy Osbourne songs ever. There's all kinds of spells and magic inside the text. Some highlights include spells on how to conjure someone into a donkey, summon a monkey to do your bidding, how to bring forth spirits to fetch you goods. The key point in the text, however, is an epic multi-month ritual that, if performed correctly, will allow the sorcerer to commune with their guardian angel other half. The book posits that everyone's guardian angel is another part of their essence, a spiritual other. The ritual involves, I don't really know how to say this politely. You have to get blissfully intimate with the angel, and once this honeymoon period is over, the caster then has to summon up and conquer unredeemed spirits of the infernal regions of hell to conquer them, and then will be able to be master of the spirit domain. That all sounds pretty complicated though, honestly, so all things considered, maybe it's for the best that this one's locked away. I don't really need to mess with magic, that's above my pay grade, and I'm not looking to get too intimate with my significant other guardian angel anytime soon. But if you're looking for more true tales of terror, fake frightening fibs, cursed relics, ancient evils, ancient cryptids, aliens, conspiracies, ghouls, goblins, and way more of this guy, Top 5 Scary is the only place to be. So stay subscribed, make sure you hit that little bell so you don't miss a scream, but, and I know this is a big ask, Do that at the end of this video, because I got 4 more cursed books coming for you right now. Number 4, the Codex Gigas. When it comes to cursed and demonic books, the Codex Gigas is one of the biggest ones around. Like, literally. Codex Gigas translates to giant book, which isn't a very scary name, but when you see the size of this behemoth, it starts to make a bit more sense. The thing is massive, 2 feet long. While giant oversized illuminated manuscripts were fairly common around this era, this one stood out for its immense size and also the impressively scary rumors surrounding the cursed text. It's occasionally been dubbed Satan's Bible due to the interesting legend behind its origin. Now, supposedly the story goes that a monk by the name of Herman the Recluse, which same, honestly. Anyway, Herman was condemned to death for heresy and was to be walled up alive and starved. In a desperate plea to save himself, Herman tried to convince the prior and the abbot that if he could pen a manuscript to honor God's glory and contained all of human knowledge and history in one night, that he could be let free. The abbot agreed, thinking that this was, of course, an impossible task. Well, he didn't know that Herman was the John Wick of penmanship, who wrote until midnight, wearing his fingertips down, and in a moment of desperation, made a prayer to Lucifer, and asked for his eternal soul in exchange for the book's completion in order to repent for his heresy. I totally get it, you know? I've done some pretty crazy things trying to write my script in time for a deadline too. I sold my soul earlier this week to get top 5 UFOs in on time. I get it. Now, not poking any holes in your logic here though, Herman, but I will say maybe selling your soul to the devil is part of the reason you got into this mess, because that actually sounds a ton like heresy. A variation of the legend states that Herman worked for years on the manuscript, day and night, but still asked for the devil's assistance anyway, the lazy bastard. Anyway, the legend states that Satan signed the Bible with an illustration of himself. The ego on that guy. The book contains a birth of information. Like they said, it was supposed to be everything humanity had attained up to that point. Now these days, the Codex Gigas is preserved in the Natural Museum in Sweden, where you can admire the line work of Herman the Recluse and his ghost author, Satan. Number 3, the Grand Grimoire. Our next entry has been formerly referred to as the Gospel of Satan. It's different from Satan's Bible, and is said to be a cursed book whose knowledge had to be sealed away to protect humanity. So this might be the most dangerous book ever published after Hop on Pop. The Grand Grimoire was said to have been penned by a priest in the 16th century who was possessed by a litany of demons who compelled the man to put their knowledge to paper. Acting as a scribe for the demons, the man wrote everything they knew about dark incantations, spells, instructions on how to cast rituals, how to bind a demon to make it do your bidding. Wait, a demon wrote this book? A demon gave instructions about how it wants to be bound to a human and serve humans? That's a freaky little demon. That's not all though. There's a step-by-step recipe for a little necromancy if you're down to dabble in some dark arts and make some bones dance to your rhythm. The book really covers all the fun stuff you've been told not to do. Now it's not all brimstone and hellfire too. There's rituals on how to manipulate your luck, how to conduct a seance, and I think this is adorable. But there's even ways to make people love you in the book. Now, a little dating tip from your friends at Top 5 Scary. I will say, if you need a demon's help to make them like you, that might not be the most successful relationship, but you do you, don't let me get in the way. Now, if all of this is sounding pretty appealing, and I don't blame you, because it all does sound really cool, just know that the book is considered high treason. Even so much as cracking the spine is considered equivalent to selling your soul, so maybe hold off on that Amazon order for a bit. Besides, because of the book's cursed reputation, the original copy is said to be locked away in the Vatican's famous secret archives, and no matter how many times you ask, they're not going to let you look at it, even if you say you just want to take a quick little peek at the illustrations. I know, so unfair. Ugh, I don't even have any late fees. Let me take the book out. Number 2, the Untitled Grimoires. You think a book with a name is scary? Imagine a book without a name. Coming up next on our list of haunted nighttime reading is the Untitled Grimoires. It was so scary they couldn't even deign to give it a name. The books are said to originate from a Wiccan high priestess named Persephone Adarasta Irene, who has one of the coolest names I've ever heard. She recorded a book of her family's spiritual history. These manuscripts record Persephone's Wiccan history that she reworked all through her adult life. The first book contains around 250 pages of spells, incantations, curses, enchantments, and some information on gems, planets, rites, potions, and exorcisms. Basically anything and everything that a fledgling sorceress or warlock could ever possibly want. The second book is a little more light, you know, the sequel's a bit of a letdown. It's just alchemy, chemistry, cures, perfumes, and tonics. Now the first book is believed to be the one to carry the curse, as Persephone's spells are believed in Wiccan culture to contain more power than most other records due to her embodiment of her own soul inside the book. They say all authors put a bit of soul in their work, and it seems as if the Wiccan High Priestess took that a bit more literally than most of us do. These books would eventually find their way into the possession of one Alice Montserrat, a close working associate of Aleister Crowley, who you know from earlier in the video as one of the most famous practicers of the occult and lover of white horses. Montserrat left an inscription in the first page of the book, warning to all of those who open it, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further, or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hands of the craft." This was written in several languages to make sure it came across to just about anybody who opened the book. Now I'm kind of unclear on that. I don't know, some of the old words, the old English is kind of confusing me. Does that mean the book should be read? Like it's good? I don't know. Not really getting that. And finally, coming in at her #1 spot today on demonic dictionaries and evil literature is the infamous Lesser Key of Solomon. Make no mistake from the title, even though it's a Lesser Key of Solomon, it is not a lesser evil. It's an anonymously authored grimoire on demonology, so not written by Solomon. It's also known as Clavicula Salomonis Regis or Lemegeton, is a grimoire. It's a book of magic that gained significant prominence in occult literature. Now the grimoire is attributed to King Solomon, the biblical figure renowned for his wisdom and mastery over supernatural forces. It's believed to have been compiled in the 17th century, though it draws upon earlier occult tradition and texts. The Lesser Key consists of several sections, or books, each focusing on a different aspect of magic and summoning. The most well-known is the Ars Goetia, which represents descriptions and instructions for evoking 72 demons or spirits, each with its own unique powers and abilities, kind of like Pokemon. These demons are said to be bound by King Solomon and can be summoned and controlled by skilled practitioners. Other sections of the Lesser Key of Solomon includes fan favorites like the Ars Theurgia Goetia, Ars Paulina, Ars Almadel, and Ars Notoria. These sections delve into topics such as angelic invocations, the use of talismans and amulets, and rituals for obtaining divine knowledge and wisdom. Now the grimoire has had a profound influence on various occult and magical traditions, including ceremonial magic, demonology, and the practice of spirit conjuration. It's been studied and referenced by countless practitioners, scholars, and scary YouTubers throughout history. Now, goes without saying, this is a potentially dangerous text. The act of summoning and working with entities described in the grimoire is not for the faint of heart, and really should be saved for those with a bit of spiritual expertise under their wizard hat. In conclusion, significant grimoire, very, very scary. I'm probably going to leave it closed for now.
Number 5, The Yellow Wallpaper. Okay, The Yellow Wallpaper. I first read this book when I was in 5th grade, and I do know that it is a lot of required reading for a lot of people. Like, you'd read it in 9th or 10th grade. So you may be thinking now, oh my god, V, why would you put this on the list? It's not cursed, we can all read it. It's a weird book. And it's a good book, a really flipping good book. And I know that we have a lot of videos on this channel of books that are cursed that you cannot read and that you will never get the chance to read. So I wanted to create a video about books that are going to mess up your head and twist your psychology into a complete knot. But if a complete mind twist doesn't interest you and you would prefer hearing about the more supernatural aspects of Top 5 Scary, just search books on our channel's search bar and you will get a plethora of videos to choose from. Today, I really want to talk about things that we can all relate to. But if you are interested in some reading that will mess your mind up and leave you scared and thinking for the rest of your life, definitely stick around because we are about to get into some really cool and twisted reading. So number 4, or number 5 and 4 now because I rambled too much. Let's try this again. The Yellow Wallpaper. This book is a masterclass in imagery and descriptive devices because wow, you feel like you are in this room. It follows a woman who is placed into a room that is lined wall to wall with yellow wallpaper, and slowly, page by page, she begins to go insane, describing more outlandish and detailed scenes being played out in the lines of her wallpaper. Throughout the story, her descriptions get so much more in-depth depth and twisted, and you begin to feel like you are going insane with her. Every single word, every single thing that she is imagining, you are seeing full on face to face. It's like you're looking it in the eyes. And I have aphantasia, so I actually cannot visualize anything in my head. Like, you say think of an apple, and I don't see an apple, it's just darkness. But somehow this book was able to surpass my biological evolution, and I was able to imagine everything, every word, every description. It was being burnt into my eyelids. And there are very few books that can do that for me, which is how you know that this is an insanely weird and well written story. I really recommend giving this a read. It will mess with your mind and you will never ever want to have yellow wallpaper again. Which, okay, interestingly enough, this book actually made me want to have yellow wallpaper when I was in the 5th grade. So I don't know, maybe this job is like where I was destined to work, because I don't think many people after reading this book would yearn so desperately to have yellow wallpaper. Number 3, I have no mouth and I must scream. I don't even know where to start with this one. This book left me with such a disturbed and upset feeling right into the pit of my stomach. The story follows a group of 5 people, the last people alive in a post-apocalyptic Earth, that are being eternally tormented in a computer called AM. Okay, so the first time I read this, I was pretty confused, up until I would say probably the 2nd page, and then I started getting really into it. But I think you're supposed to be confused so you can really settle into the story and the world, and all of the ideas within. The book centers around 5 characters who are essentially stuck in an advanced AI computer called AM in a post-apocalyptic world. The computer is vengeful and torments them eternally. They have been stuck here, unaging, essentially immortalized for 109 years. Allegedly. It's kind of hard to know for sure because the computer like messes with their mind and time a lot. Every single day for these humans is filled with the computer psychologically, physically tormenting them in every way imaginable, in insanely disturbing and creative ways. The book ends with the character who we are hearing the story from realizing that the only way to end the torment they are experiencing and to hurt the computer in some way as like revenge is through their death or by taking away AM's toys. Somehow he ends up being the last one alive. I won't spoil it exactly, but everyone else is dead except for him. AM is very upset by this, so AM ensures that for the rest of eternity, he, the last alive, will suffer every day and will never be given the chance to escape through death like the others. He is essentially turned into a living blob, lacking limbs and appendages. Lacking ears and eyes and a mouth. He's just a mass of goo. His eye sockets are described as being filled with a white fog. He is stuck unmoving for the rest of his eternal life. Which of course brings us to the final line of the book and the title, I have no mouth and I must scream. So yeah, this is an incredibly disturbing book. Cursed, I guess you could say. I would definitely recommend giving the story a read. It is short, but the impact it will have on you is nothing less than long-lasting and permanent. Number 2, The Lottery. I first read this book a couple of months ago in July. It was an English camp retreat that I read it at, which I won't get too much into, but let's just say I did not enjoy that too much. I was one of 2 girls in a group of 18 guys, and they were all years younger than me, and most of them weren't funny and mansplained everything to me, which is my worst nightmare, and it was painful. But actually from the teachers, it was a very educational experience, and I learned a lot, and one of the things I learned about was this story, The Lottery. It is a short story written by the famous Shirley Jackson, and it definitely makes you think. Upon first read, it definitely gives off Hunger Games vibes, and I'm sorry I said vibes, but there is no other way to explain it. Same vibes. It is a very surprising read. I think you'll be surprised by the ending, but upon rereading it, you kind of realize how brutally obvious every piece of foreshadowing was. But upon the first read, you're left with an uneasy feeling. You do not expect what's to come, especially up until the 3rd page. You really don't realize how uneasy everyone is in the story. You hear about a tradition that other towns are considering canceling. You hear about these very young people going around in groups of friends and picking up pebbles that are being collected in piles after being released from school. You hear casual conversation being exchanged through neighbors. You don't hear the underlying unease that is being sown throughout the crowd of people. Someone goes up to the front of the crowd, and next to a dinky yet looming box, they begin to explain that they will be drawing names, like every year in this town's annual lottery. play. The reader thinks, oh, a game, a lottery, a winner. This is exciting, this is cool, this is great. But you do not expect the ending. And for me, it was kind of a whoa moment where I had to take a step back and reevaluate where the book had shifted to. It's a great book filled with eerie imagery and explanations, and another that will absolutely stay burned into your mind. Number 1, The Landlady. This book is by one of my all-time favorite authors, Roald Dahl. Responsible for creating some of the most famous stories of all time, like Matilda, The Witches, James and the Giant Peach, The BFG, Lamb to the Slaughter, and so many more. It's no surprising that he would be capable of creating a truly disturbing short story, very worthy of being on this list. So, The Landlady follows a boy named Billy who is starting a new job in a new town. He looks for a place to stay the night when all of a sudden he sees a beautifully charming and warm house advertising itself as a bed and breakfast. It is run by a friendly but odd lady, and only 2 guests had previously stayed there in the past 3 years. We know there have only been 2 guests thanks to a guest book that the old woman makes every single guest who stays there sign, which she tells Billy, and when Billy is signing it, he recognizes the 2 names, which are the only ones on it, but he can't remember where he recognizes them from, though he feels like they were both famous for the same thing, like they were in a newspaper or something for the same thing. I won't spoil anything because uncovering the truth yourself is far more exciting. Throughout the book, you feel an uneasy sense of dread, discomfort, and frustration as the naive main character innocently believes everything he is being told and does not seem to comprehend the idea that he could be in danger. It is an extremely captivating book, and I find the descriptions to be very lively. The dialogue is eerie and sets the tone of the story masterfully. This book leaves you with a sinking feeling like no other. If you are looking for a read that will stay in your mind every time you check into a small B&B, which, you know, it's not very common anymore, this is definitely the book for you.
Kicking off at number 5, House of Leaves, Mark Z. Danielewski. And you may be thinking, what the F, Jack? House of Leaves? I'm expecting some 200-year-old novels at the least. I want some top hat and cane style gothic horror, or at least a mad monk of sorts. Hey, listen, gothic horror is a tried and tested medium, but like I said at the start of this video, you need to know the rules in order to break them. And Mark Danielewski's phenomenal novel is as mind-boggling and intriguing as it is terrifying. I don't say this lightly, but House of Leaves is a work of art. It really is, and whilst on the surface, and then some, this is certainly a horror novel, it is also far more than that. Written by Mark Z. Danielewski and released back in the year 2000 as his debut novel, House of Leaves is a story unlike any that you've ever read before. It is told by a frame within a frame within a frame, kind of. It is told initially through the eyes of Johnny Truant, a tattoo artist and professed unreliable narrator. As he is searching for a new apartment, he stumbles upon the home of the recently deceased Zampano, a blind and elderly man who lived alone. There he finds Zampano's old belongings, one of them being a manuscript of a documentary film called The Navidson Record. And here is where we hit the gothic of gothic horror. The film is, in fact, the documentation of a young family, the Navidsons, who after returning home from a trip, notice something strange about their house. It's gotten bigger, and not just in the feng shui type of deal, but it's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, and then it can't stop growing. Now, I'll say no more because reading House of Leaves is akin to being a detective, getting absorbed by these strange, terrifying layers of information told through the eyes of characters who are as perplexed as we are. And this is where the gothic horror is subverted by this novel. It takes that trope, the haunted house, and it delivers it in a completely alien and impossibly foreign way. It irks on cosmic horror but never quite goes there, allowing us to get as lost in the same maze as its many narrators. Reading this novel is a task in itself. It is ergodic in its execution, but that's part of its appeal. It's claustrophobic at best and paranoid at its worst. You want to dissect gothic horror in the 21st century? Read this book. Swinging in at number 4, The Woman in Black, Susan Hill. And of course this novel has to appear on our list, and truth be told, I thought long and hard about the best in class of the traditional haunted house ghost story. Of course, this same novel could stand amongst Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, The Mysteries of Udolpho, or even Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey, but I think in terms of pure execution, as well as a genuinely terrifying example of gothic horror, Susan Hill's 1983 novel The Woman in Black stands above the rest. And again, you might be thinking, come on Jack, I want some 18th century stuff, stop playing games. But I'd say, hey, Gothic horror is alive and well, and 1983 was a pretty terrifying year. Written by Susan Hill, the remarkable author who had released several brilliant works of horror, The Woman in Black tells the tale of a man named Arthur Kipps, a retired solicitor who one night is telling ghost stories with his wife and 4 stepchildren, but when he's asked for his scariest story, he snaps back to a time in his younger days and he turns white as a sheet. You see, many years earlier, Kipps is summoned to a small market town on the northeast coast of England to attend the funeral of Mrs. Alice Drablow, an elderly and reclusive widow who lived alone in the desolate and secluded Eel Marsh house for many years. Which obviously, if you've seen the 2012 movie starring Daniel Radcliffe, or perhaps the long-running stage adaptation, you'll certainly be familiar with. But the truth of the matter is, the spirit of this novel captures something truly gothic in its approach, something that is otherwise difficult to do on screen. As we peel through the pages of Hill's novel, we are just as curious and confused as Arthur Kipps himself, willing him to leave town, but at the same time unable to stop turning the page. With The Woman in Black, Hill held a mirror to many of the traumas found in Gothic literature and applied them to an otherwise completely modern retelling. It's almost as if Hill took all of the tropes set out by her predecessors and then decided to just turn the fear factor up a notch. Next up at number 3, The Picture of Dorian Gray, Oscar Wilde. And I was umming and ahhing about our third spot on this list, and so let it be known that this was a close toss-up between this entry and Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart, a posthumous collection of his many brilliant short stories, but I think it's probably best that we include full novels here. Just a little side note, but know that Poe is well and truly recognised. Anyway, talking of a Gothic portrait of a man's life in literature, let's talk about The Picture of Dorian Gray, which, horror aside, is just a remarkable novel by all accounts, as well as being a deeply philosophical musing on the nature of the individual. Who would know it then that at the time of this publication in 1890, The Picture of Dorian Gray was pretty much trashed by critics. Really, it was well and truly torn to shreds, as well as being massively censored by Wilde's editor without his knowledge. But come on guys, of course it was going to take a few decades for people to realise the importance of a horrifying portrait and a well-kept secret. The tale, which many of you will be familiar with, is an observation of hedonism in the pursuit of pleasure, and yet the eternal price that we all pay for a life of decadence. And also, well, you know, selling your soul to the devil for the price of immortality, but that kind of goes without saying. Obviously we're talking about the metaphorical devil because this is Gothic horror, and heaven and hell don't serve too much of a purpose on the mortal plane. The novel details the young aristocrat Dorian Gray, whose portrait is painted by the artist Basil Hallward, which through supernatural means ages the painting instead of himself. His body retains perfect youth and vigour, whilst the portrait grows into a hideous record of evil that he must keep hidden away from the rest of the world. Now, listen, this tale is sprawling in its approach and takes perhaps a little more work than some of the rest of the novels on this list, but there's no other way about it. The very essence of The Picture of Dorian Gray is Gothic horror. Coming in at number 2, The Monk, Matthew Lewis. Alright guys, I'm pretty sure that some of you jumped into this video with the intention of discovering something truly messed up. And yeah, this is that novel. And for a story written in 1796, yes, 1796, this story could give most modern horror movies a run for their money. Written by Matthew Gregory Lewis when he was just 20 years old, The Monk in many ways exemplifies how and why Gothic horror first came about. In the oversaturation of romanticism and literature of the time, in the many tales of love loss and sweeping, domineering landscapes, many writers and readers were just bored. They were just straight up bored, man. Well, I mean the aristocracy were bored because, come on guys, we plebs were too busy working in the fields and fighting wars to read. And particularly in regard to the birth of the male Gothic, this audience wanted some scandal. Now it probably goes without saying, but The Monk was absolutely savaged by critics at the time, mainly for its obscenity, incest, murder and eroticism. Yeah, you get the picture. It tells a tale of a man named Ambrosio, an incredibly devout monk who as a small child was left on the doorstep of a monastery and was perceived as a gift from the Virgin Mary by the monks that lived there. In other words, this man is piety incarnate. Or should I say was. Because guess what? He succumbs to the temptations of a young girl who enters the monastery disguised as a young boy and then leads him down a path of sorcery, murder and torture, generally tearing down all pillars of purity and goodness with every turn. Obviously The Monk is very much a tale of its time, and from an analytical perspective it offers an incredibly narrow worldview, but this novel pretty much defined many motifs of Gothic horror, as well as the perception of the church later down the line in horror fiction as a whole. I mean, the reason behind the success of this novel was down to the scandal that it caused and the sensationalism that it later garnered, but in the actual bones of this tale, The Monk in many ways is a masterpiece of Gothic fiction. Its approach is widely psychological and its execution is the very tactile fear of the physical. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, Frankenstein, Mary Shelley. And this is a rare moment where I hold up the obvious choice at the very tip top of the pile. There is no other way to say it. Frankenstein is the finest gothic horror novel ever written. Still, to this day. And as I briefly mentioned at the opening of this video, this spot should certainly be reserved for the greats, Bram Stoker's Dracula included, but even when compared to that particular novel, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is in a league of its own. Let me put it this way, whilst Walpole's The Castle of Otranto certainly was the first depiction of gothic horror in literature, and whilst Matthew Lewis's The Monk fleshed out those very same themes, it was this novel that truly defined them. And how did all of that start? In a lake house in Geneva, surrounded by renowned writers Lord Byron, her future husband Percy B. Shelley, John Polidori and several others, they decided to see who could create the scariest horror story. And Mary Shelley, who had never written a novel before, blew them all out of the water. Frankenstein. And I don't need to tell you about this tale because without doubt you'll all be familiar with it, but really if you haven't actually sat down and read this novel, I implore you to do so. You see, not only did this novel give life, literally, to the ongoing pursuit of gothic horror, it also gave rise to science fiction in horror, as well as sci-fi as a whole. Frankenstein was the start of many things. Mary Shelley took the themes of the gothic, the sweeping landscapes, the base exploration of the forbidden and the breaking of cultural and societal taboos, and she said, we can go one further. We don't have to be resigned to the fact that horror is simply a pursuit or a simulation of the things that we should or shouldn't do. It isn't just about surface morality. Gothic horror is much more important than that. It asked, what does it mean to be human? How far can civilization go in tampering with nature? What is the ultimate price of creating a monster in pursuit of pretending to be a god? Whilst it may not seem it through her novel's immortality, Mary Shelley continues to challenge us by asking these questions. And now, in many ways, this story is more relevant than ever before.
Number 5. The Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. The Book of Abramelin, or more formally, the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, is an old Jewish magic text that is thought to date back at some point in the 14th or 15th century. Now, it wasn't the initial publication of this book that gave it its notoriety. Instead, it was when it was 19th and 20th century magicians who were in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is a British secret society dedicated to the practice, research, and upholding of old occult magic ways. But hush hush, you didn't hear that from me. One of the founders of the Golden Dawn, S.L.M. Mathers, created the first ever English translation of the book in the 1890s, drawing from a previously established 17th century French translation. Now, Mathers' translation quickly became the definite magic text of the 19th century, eventually helping inspire Aleister Crowley to inspire his system of magic, the legendary occultist and fixture of one of the best Ozzy Osbourne songs ever. That solo still goes, man. Now, there's all kinds of spells and magic inside this text. Some real highlights include spells on how to conjure somebody and turn them into a donkey, how to summon a monkey to do your bidding, that sounds great, and how to bring forth spirits to fetch you goods. The big key point in this text, however, is an epic, multi-month spanning ritual that, if performed correctly, will allow the sorcerer to commune with their own guardian angel. The book theorizes that everyone has a guardian angel and that they are another part of their essence, a spiritual other half of yourself. The ritual involves, I don't know how to say this politely. You have to, well, they say you have to get blissfully intimate with your other half. Once the honeymoon period is over, the caster then has to summon up and conquer unredeemed spirits of the infernal regions of hell to conquer them. And then they'll be able to master the spirit domain. That sounds like a lot of irredeemed spirits. I hope my angel might help out a little bit with that. This all sounds very complicated, so all things considered, maybe it's for the best that this one's locked away. Seems like heavy reading, not before bedtime. And if you're looking for more true tales of terror, fake frightening fribs, cursed relics, ancient evils, aliens, cryptids, conspiracies, ghouls, goblins, and pretty much everything spooky you can think of, Top 5 Scary is the place to be. Stay subscribed, but way more importantly, stay scared. Okay, let's keep going. Whole lot more video to get through. Number 4. Book of Soyga. The Book of Soyga, also known by a more complicated name, the Alderia Siva Soyga Vocor, is an occult text that hails back from the 15th century. I'm pretty sure just saying that name out loud in front of the camera, I probably caused a curse on the office, so I'm sorry about that. This text would have been lost to time, just another forgotten cursed manuscript, if it weren't for the obsessive efforts of John Dee, a 16th century polymath who had his hands in just about every field of study. Polymath is a fancy word for a guy who studies just about everything, and Dee practiced chemistry, physics, astronomy, and also the occult. You know, there's always more to learn, right? Mr. D was particularly interested in contacting angels to learn the secrets of the universe. And this book contains a litany of recipes for magic spells and all sorts of writings on demonology and astrology, but most importantly, and what caught Mr. D's attention, is that the book is said to include the names and genealogies of all of heaven's angels. D believed that the book contained an ancient divine message written in a language spoken to by Adam, the true unspoiled word of God. That's a pretty big statement. Now, much like the Voynich Manuscript, which I'll mention a little later in the video, so put a pin in that for now, it had 36 cryptic tables that remained undeciphered for centuries. D attempted at one point to crack the code with the help of a mystic who convinced D that he could channel the angels for him. D allegedly was so desperate to unlock the contents of this book that when his mystic told him it was part of the ritual that he be allowed a night with John Dee's wife, he agreed. That's the oldest trick in the book, man. The old "I'll let you talk to angels if I can go out with your wife" gamble. Ugh, can't believe you fell for it. Dee's wife would end up birthing a son, Theodore D, the fatherhood of which was disputed, to say the least. John Dee was never able to crack the code in his lifetime and decipher the Book of Soyga, and perhaps for the best, as it was said he was warned that man was never meant to uncover those secrets, and that knowledge would end his life. The book is now said to reside in the British Library, although digital copies are available. Read it at your own risk, and if somebody says they can translate it for you, just make sure you really read everything on the fine print in the contract before you sign that, okay? Just looking out for you. Number 3, the Grand Grimoire. That is so fun to say. This next entry has been nicknamed the Gospel of Satan. So if you're looking for an indication as to whether or not this book is, evil, there you go. They had to put that on a sticker, put it on the cover right next to the Oprah's Book Club recommendation. This book is said to have originally been written by a man possessed by the devil sometime in the 16th century. It's an infamous occult text and is said to contain dark incantations, spells and rituals, tools on how to force demons to do one's bidding, and even some instructions for a little necromancy 101 for fledgling dead raisers. It's not all brimstone and hellfire though. There are also reports on how to make pacts with spirits for personal gain, rituals to win the lottery, talk to ghosts, make yourself invisible, and even adorably, how to win love. Never heard of a demon working to help someone fall in love. Now, all that sounds cool, definitely. I know I would love to have like a little skeleton minion who could help me with chores, maybe be like my little buddy. I love playing a necromancer in Skyrim, but these things don't really work out if you don't know what you're doing. Take a look at Full Metal Alchemist, that didn't work, they didn't know what they were doing. Even opening this book is considered equivalent to selling your soul to the devil. Soon as you crack the spine, it's like signing the contract. Because of the book's nefarious reputation, the original copy of the manuscript has been sealed away inside the Vatican's secret archives, and not currently available to the public. So I don't think whatever they're listing on Amazon as the Grand Grimoire for $10 is the real Grand Grimoire. Number 2, the Voynich Manuscript. The Voynich Manuscript has got to be one of my favorite stories of a mysterious manuscript, ever. I guess that's why I put it at number 2. Unlike a lot of entries on this list, it's actually very easy to come across a digital copy of the Voynich Manuscript. It's available to read online. The only trouble is reading it honestly probably won't do you a lick of good, since it's written in a language no one has ever heard of and there's no record of it ever having existed. Yale University has the entire thing up and available online if you're feeling confident enough that you can take a crack at it and feel like banging your head against a brick wall for a few hours. The book is a handwritten, hand-illustrated codex of 240 pages of pure mystery, featuring gorgeous illustrations and typography, and what the book is about is your guess is as good as mine, honestly. Carbon dating suggests that it stems from the 15th century, and analysis of the style of the text and illustrations within suggests that it could have been penned during the Italian Renaissance. But just about every single aspect of this thing is shrouded in mystery. We don't even know what it's truthfully called. The Voynich Manuscript is the name it was given after the initial owner, Wilfrid Voynich, purchased it in 1912 and brought it to public attention for the first time. Sorry, not the first owner, I'm sure several other people owned it before him. As such, the language inside the book is occasionally referred to as Voynichese. Now, some pages are missing, lost to time completely, and the pages we do have are just a puzzle. Some are foldable sheets of various sizes, some pages have wondrously drawn diagrams or illustrations showing things like plants, some fictional, some real, and astrological symbols, drawings of people. Over the years, there have been several efforts to try and decode and document the book and figure out just what it is. A prevailing theory, admittedly a boring one, is that it's a guide to botany written in a mysterious script, a forgotten language, an uncrackable code, an incredibly convoluted hoax. Of course, with any good mystery, there are some wild theories. Some say the Voynich Manuscript could be written from an extraterrestrial gifted to humanity, or written in demonic script perhaps, or that biblical language that we were mentioning in the book Soyga a few points ago. Like I said, it's available online, so I leave this up to you. If you manage to crack it, let us know down below in the comments. We're all clamoring for it. And number 1, the Codex Gigas. When it comes to cursed and demonic books, the Codex Gigas is one of the biggest ones around. Like, literally. Codex Gigas translates to giant book, which isn't exactly a scary name. When you see the size of this behemoth, it starts to make a little bit more sense. This thing is massive. 2 feet long. Now, giant oversized illuminated manuscripts were pretty common around the area the book was penned, but this one stood out for its immense size and the dark rumors surrounding the supposedly cursed text. Don't even try reading this thing, just lifting it will give you a hernia. That's the curse. It's occasionally been dubbed Satan's Bible due to the legend surrounding its origin. It's a good story, so get cozy. Supposedly, the legend goes that a monk by the name of Herman the Recluse, which is also what they used to call me, was condemned to death for heresy and was to be walled up alive and starved. In a desperate plea to save himself, Herman tried to convince the prior and the abbot as a whole that if he could pen a manuscript to honor God's glory, and that it would contain all of human knowledge and all of human history in one book, and if he could pen it in one night, he would be let free. The abbot agreed, thinking this was, of course, impossible. Herman wrote until midnight, wearing his fingertips down, and in a moment of desperation, made a prayer to Lucifer and asked for his eternal soul in exchange for the book's completion in order to repent for his sins. I totally get it. You know, I gotta be honest, I have done some pretty nutso stuff trying to make sure my scripts get in time for deadline. Haven't quite sold my soul to the devil yet. I usually just rail Red Bulls, but I'd probably make a similar deal under a similar deadline. Now, I don't want to poke any holes in Herman's logic here, but I will say maybe selling your soul to the devil is part of the reason you got into this mess in the first place, because that does sound a little bit like heresy, but it's not my place to judge. I'm not an archdeacon. A variation of the legend states that Herman worked for years on the manuscript, day and night, but still was unable to complete it in his lifetime and asked for the devil's assistance. Anyway, no matter the story, the legend states that Satan signed the Bible with a particularly terrifying illustration of himself. I mean, take a look at it, it's horrifying looking. The book contains a birth of information. Like they said, it was supposed to be everything humanity had attained up to that point in one big book. These days, the Codex Gigas is preserved in the Natural Museum in Sweden, where you can admire the penmanship of Herman the Recluse and his ghost author, Satan.
Number 5. The Turn of the Screw. The novella was so popular that there have been about 27 different versions made into film and television, the latest being a Netflix show titled The Haunting of Bly Manor, which acts as a follow-up to the 2018 hit miniseries The Haunting of Hill House, which I'll get into a little bit later on with this list. The Gothic novella was published in 1898 from author Henry James and features a governess who is hired to raise and take care of a man's niece and nephew. The 20-year-old governess arrives at Bly Manor and meets 10-year-old Miles and 8-year-old Flora. Great names, wow. The kids are the sweetest kids on the planet, of course. Now, what's a spooky story without the ghosts, right? The grounds are haunted by 2 ghosts who appear to have been past employees of the grounds. Love working, apparently. I wanted to read this book before the Netflix show premieres next month, and I'm glad that I did. The novella is written from the governess' point of view, so as she learns more about Bly Manor, the ghosts, and the children, her motive and tone change at the same time as the readers. So you're not quite sure if these ghosts are real, maybe it's just the kids playing along, or maybe the governess is losing her mind the whole time. I find it easier to read a novel if there's a main character that narrates the experience as well. That way, if anything scary goes down, you can just keep it completely separate in your mind and actually sleep at night, you know? The book itself is only 168 pages, so if you're looking for an easy weekend read, The Turn of the Screw might be the way to go. Number 4, Coraline. Okay, so does anybody else remember that creepy 2009 stop motion movie with the young girl who's got like buttons for eyes? The movie Coraline was somehow rated PG, and it was marketed as a fun stop motion family film that turned out to be the 3rd highest grossing stop motion film of all time. And if you have seen Coraline, you know this movie is not that kid friendly. I mean, this movie creeped me out when I saw it, and I was like 15. Imagine being 5 and watching this in a loud theater.
Now, you're going to stay here forever.
No, I'm not!
Yeah, I would My pants. The movie is based off the book Coraline, which was released back in 2002 from author Neil Gaiman. The book is much darker than its colorful movie adaptation. The story centers around a young girl named Coraline Jones as she moves into a new flat with her parents. Upon settling into her new home, Coraline discovers a door that opens to a long tunnel to the other flat. After being warned not to go from her neighbors, Coraline decides, let's see what this hype's all about. She finds an alternate version of her new home at the other side of the hallway. A seemingly happier version of her family too. Her other mother and other father have buttons for eyes and are much more lively than her real parents. And her other mother cooks delicious meals, and her toys can even come to life and interact with Coraline. The other parents pay more attention to her, so naturally Coraline wants to spend more time in the other home. The other mother asks Coraline to stay forever, but in doing so, Coraline must allow for her eyes to be sewn into buttons. So again, the fact that this book turned into a kids movie just baffles me. I remember sitting in the theater with my family, and about halfway through, everyone started looking at each other, a couple kids started crying. So if you're into dark alternate reality novels, and you have a thing for buttons, Coraline is the perfect pick for you. Number 3, Pet Sematary. Published in 1983, Pet Sematary was actually a book that Stephen King didn't want to publish, which is crazy considering it's one of his most recognized pieces of work. Horrified by what he'd written and the conclusions that he'd drawn, King was reluctant to show anybody the finished novel back in the early 80s. He told the Paris Review in 2006 that he usually gives his drafts to his wife, Tabby, so she can read them, but this time he decided not to. He simply put it in his desk and just left it there. And it wasn't until 1983 that the distressing novel was published as a final contract closing deal when he went separate ways with publisher Doubleday. He had it on the back burner, and his wife basically convinced him just to publish Pet Sematary and just be done with it already. And to this day, King himself finds the book very distressing. So what's the deal? What makes this book so terrifying that the author himself gets scared from it? Well, the story follows Dr. Lewis Creed and his family as they find a pet cemetery in their backyard after moving to a small town in Maine. After the family cat is killed, Lewis buries it in a pet cemetery, and the cat comes back to life. I mean, it is a Stephen King novel, so it's way scarier than I'm making it sound right now. The novel was actually inspired by Stephen King's real life. That's right, back in the 70s, King moved with his family to be a writer at the University of Maine. And while staying there, his youngest son was flying a kite on the property and ran towards the road with trucks flying by. It looked just like the road from the movie if you've seen it. His son didn't share the same fate as in the book or the movie, but King included this dark version of reality in his book because it was simply haunting him. He wanted to get this version into a book and out of his mind. So now we all have to deal with it. Thanks, Stephen. Number 2, It. Written by Stephen King, again, in 1986. This book is thick. Coming in at over 1,100 pages, Stephen King gave us arguably one of the greatest horror novels of all time. While fans are divided on which of the movies they liked more, the book has always been hit with fans, receiving the British Fantasy Award in 1987. The book starts with a young boy named Georgie Denbrough in a small quiet town in Maine named Derry. Georgie loses a paper boat that his brother Bill had made for him down the storm drain. We then meet our monster, Pennywise the Clown, as he offers him a nice shiny red balloon. Georgie politely declines the offer, and in doing so, meets his demise. Bill and his friends start to experience paranormal episodes, each one more frightening than the last. Pennywise targets children because they get way more afraid than adults, and that simply makes them taste better. Gross. After Pennywise is done his feeding, he returns to sleep for 27 years until it's time for lunch again. And after that, Pennywise returns to Derry, and the same kids who were once terrified by Pennywise have to face him all over again. It's just a train wreck. It's a great time. It would be kind of hard to find somebody who hasn't read it or seen any of the movies or wacky TV series about the novel. It's probably the most famous Stephen King novel next to Pet Sematary. I mean, it did scare me a lot more than the movies did because it caught me off guard. It caught me off guard. See what I did there? Not bad. No big deal. Once I finally got through the many pages of It, I was excited for It Chapter 2 to hit cinemas. While some scenes were done very well, the book, in my opinion, is still much better. As a whole, the time jumping is done in such a smooth way that you don't really find a proper time to set the book down and get some sleep. This book took me a while to read. I mean, and during that time, I remember having tons of nightmares, more than usual. I mean, obviously. So if you were a fan of the movies, just make sure you grab the book and give it a shot. Also, when you're grabbing the book, make sure you lift with your legs and not your back, because this thing's a literal brick and it's gonna pull something out of a spot. And number 1, The Haunting of Hill House. Written by Shirley Jackson in 1959, Stephen King has gone so far as to say The Haunting of Hill House is one of the finest horror novels of the 20th century. And I absolutely agree. The novel is the inspiration behind 2 movies, both called The Haunting, one a lot better than the other, and even a Netflix show titled The Haunting of Hill House. If you haven't seen the Netflix show, you gotta check it out. It's probably my favorite Netflix original series of all time. Oh, but what about Stranger Things? Nah, move over, Dustin. Your times came, it's went. Get out of here. I didn't read the book until after I was done with the show, which helped me out a lot. I mean, the book is terrifying because it leaves a lot up to the imagination of the reader. Some parts use stillness and anticipation as the main tool to propel the horror elements, which may be difficult to read. But after seeing the Netflix show, I had an idea of how this house is supposed to look, and more importantly, I had an idea of how the house was supposed to feel. So every time I turned the page, I was genuinely anxious and excited of what was going to happen next. It was like watching the show again for the first time. So if you haven't read the book, you should do so immediately, and if you haven't watched the show, definitely do so immediately. The novel is completely different than the show. I mean, it starts off with Dr. John Montague, who's very interested in studying the paranormal. And after finding the most haunted house of all times, he invites people over who have experienced some sort of paranormal phenomenon to spend a few weeks at Hill House as an experiment. Always a good time. Haunted houses and experiments. Let's do it. Always works. Unlike the show, the main characters are not relatives. We have Eleanor, who has experienced a poltergeist when she was 12 years old, Theodora, who has psychic abilities, and Luke Sanderson, who is related to the current owners of Hill House, who's just there to keep an eye on the guests to make sure, they don't steal anything valuable. And as soon as the guests are settled into their appropriate rooms, the horrors begin. Shirley Jackson makes it very clear that the house is vile from the start, with the terrors beginning only the second night of our guests' visit. On top of ghosts roaming the halls and mysterious voices being heard all around, the crew is left dealing with a love triangle within the house. So, if you're into The Bachelor and haunted houses, this might be your thing. Check out The Haunting of Hill House, both the novel and the show.
In number 5, we have Shams al-Ma'arif. Shams al-Ma'arif, or Shams al-Ma'arif, wa lata if'a awal-rif, is a 13th century grimoire centered on Arabic magic and claimed to be a manual for achieving esoteric spirituality. I apologize from the bottom of my heart if I butchered that pronunciation in any way. I promise I did practice. It was written by the scholar Ahmed al-Buni, who wrote it while living in Algeria, and he passed around 1225 Common Era. The book is a patchwork of bits and pieces of al-Buni's authentic works and texts by other authors. Scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah have criticized the book and labeled al-Buni as a deluded devil worshipper. Good to know that across all religions over time, some things never change. In terms of more modern examples, that was a common assumption from Ed and Lorraine Warren, probably the most famed demonologists of all time. Personally, I believe half of what they investigated was real, and the other half was just them making a living, which at the end of the day, I have to give some respect to. Well, minus viewing alternate lifestyles outside of Christianity as a sin. Pardon me, I got a little sidetracked there. In contemporary form, the book consists of 2 volumes, the Shams al-Ma'arif al-Kubra and the Shams al-Ma'arif al-Sugra, with the former being the larger of the 2. The first few chapters introduce the reader to magic squares, and the combination of numbers and the alphabet that are believed to bring magical effect, which the author claims is the only way to communicate with jinn, angels, and spirits. The table of contents that were introduced in the later printed editions of the work contained a list of unnumbered chapters, which stretched to a number of 40. However, prior to the printing press and various other standardizations, there were 3 independent volumes that circulated, each one differing in length. While being popular, it also carries a notorious reputation for being suppressed and banned for much of Islamic history, ergo how it found its way to our list today. However, it continues to persist in being read and studied up to the present day, despite its questionable veracity and negative implications. Some Sufi orders, such as the Naqshbandi Haqqani order, have recognized its legitimacy and use as a compendium for the occult and hold it in high regard. Another title by the same author, the title having been translated to the Source of Essentials of Wisdom, is considered its companion text. In terms of translations, although a formal translation into English has not happened yet, there have been numerous renditions of a few of the more popular rituals found within the main treatise, as well as those that lie in its accompanying text. In number 4, we have the Grand Grimoire. It's a black magic grimoire, and for reference, a grimoire is a textbook of magic that typically, includes instructions on how to create magical objects like talismans and amulets, how to perform magical spells, charms, and divination, and how to summon or invoke supernatural entities such as angels, spirits, deities, and demons. In many cases, the books themselves are believed to be imbued with magical powers, although in many cultures, other sacred texts that are not grimoires, such as the Bible, have been believed to have supernatural properties intrinsically. specifically. The only contents found in a grimoire would be information on spells, rituals, the preparation of magical tools, and lists of ingredients and their magical correspondences. In this manner, while all books on magic could be thought of as grimoires, not all magical books should be thought of as grimoires. Different editions date the specific one back to 1521, 1522, or 1421, but it was probably written during the early 19th century. Some experts suggest that 1702 is when the first edition may have been created, and a Bibliothèque Bleue version, similar to a chapter book, of the text may have been published in 1750. The introductory chapter was authored by Antonio Venetiana del Rabina, who gathered his information from the original writings of King Solomon. Much of the material of this grimoire derives from the Key of Solomon and Lesser Key of Solomon, which are grimoires attributed to King Solomon. How'd you know? Also known as Le Dragon Rouge, or the Red Dragon, this book contains instructions on how to summon Lucifer, or Lucifège Rofocal, for the purpose of forming a deal with the devil. The 19th century French occultist Eliphas Lévy, author of Dogmes et Rituels de la Haute Magie, claimed the contemporary edition of Le Dragon Rouge was a counterfeit of a true older Grand Grimoire. And I love petty historical spats. The overall work is divided into two books. The first book contains instructions for summoning a demon and the construction of tools with which to force the demon to do one's bidding. The second book is divided into, two further parts. The Sanctum Regnum and Secrets, de l'Art Magique du Grand Grimoire. The Sanctum Regnum contains instructions for making a pact with the demon, allowing one to command the spirit without the tools required by Book 1, but at greater risk. Secrets contain simple spells and rituals one can employ after having performed the ritual of the first book. Some editions contain a short text between these two parts, known as Le Secret Magique ou Le Grand Art de pouvoir parler aux morts, or in English, the magic secret or the grand art of being able to, speak with the dead, which deals with necromancy. The book describes several demons as well as the rituals to summon them in order to make a pact with them. It also details several spells for winning a lottery, talking to spirits, being loved by a girl, making oneself invisible, and more. This book mentions 3 greater demons, which are similarly prioritized in the Grimmorium Verum. Sidebar, in the English translation of the work, the demons are referenced by the more generic term of spirits, which is a term I know some modern Satanists prefer. The demons that are mentioned are the Emperor Lucifer, Prince Beelzebub, and the Grand Duke Astaroth. Now this work also makes mention of 6 lesser demons, and of course I'll mention them all. Lucifège Rofocal, Prime Minister, Satan Nachia, Commander-in-Chief, Agliarept, Commandant, Fleuroti, Lieutenant General, Sargatanas, Brigadier Major, Nebiros, Marshal, and Inspector General. In number 3 we have The Orphan Story. Written in the early 1600s by Martin de Leon Cardenas, The Orphan Story is a novel about a 14-year-old Spaniard who heads to the Americas in search of, fortune. While it may sound like a normal adventure story and an outlier amongst the magic books today, a major darkness lurks within its pages that led to the novel not being published until 2018. The first draft was a 328-page manuscript, slightly yellowed, slightly worn and aged, and missing a couple of pages. It is handwritten in a decorative style reflective of the Golden or Imperial Age. The New Age print takes on a more modern bound look, featuring artwork from the original manuscript on the front, yet a rather plain book from that, the past. Belinda Palacios, a Peruvian scholar who edited the book for 2 years, says that she was warned by multiple people about the Orphan Story. It was first said to appear in 1621 under the pen name of Andres de Leon, but never made it to the press due to the presidential atmosphere at the time in Sicily. The manuscript then sat in the Hispanic Society of America until 1965 when Belinda rediscovered it. She learned that many attempts to publish the Orphan Story had happened, giving rise to rumors that malevolent energy lurked among the almost 400 pages, causing the people working on it to die. In an interview, she commented on the reported deaths, saying one was from a strange disease, another in a car accident, and yet another something else. Belinda had also heard from other professors she was working with to publish the book, one specialized in colonial letters from the Andean regions in Mexico, who was named Raquel Chang Rodriguez. So those letters described how Antonio Rodriguez Monino and William C. Bryant both died before finishing their editions of the book, and is why the manuscript is believed to be cursed or bewitched. They told her that the book was cursed, and the reason it had taken so long to publish was that anyone who worked on it would die in mysterious ways. Did the powers that be not want the ancient script out in the world? Note to self, don't go within 10 feet of the book. Not worth it. In second place, we have the book of Abramelin the Mage. Most folks, today would be happy with a gift card or dinner for their birthday, but Abramelin the Mage decided to give his son a book full of mythical curses. It's definitely a unique gift. So this book tells the story of an Egyptian mage named Abraham, or Abramelin, who taught a system of magic to Abraham of Worms, a Jew in Worms, Germany. The system of magic from this book regained popularity in the 19th and 20th centuries, partly due to Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mather's translation, which dubbed it the Book of Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. Ever since it was translated to English, this 15th century novel has had a reputation for being cursed. Now there are several theories why, but most believe it has to do with the mage's belief that everybody has their own unique personal demon. Throughout the book, there are instructions for rituals and supernatural feats to bring your demons under control. Anyone with any sense knows that it's risky to reach out and communicate with the spirit world, so it's not surprising that readers of this book have reported bad luck and hauntings by spirits from another realm. The Grimoire is framed as a sort of epistolary novel or autobiography in which Abraham of Worms describes his journey from Germany to Egypt and reveals Abramelin's magical and Kabbalistic secrets to his son Lamech. Internally, the text dates itself to the year 1458. The story involves Abraham passing his magical and Kabbalistic secrets onto his son and tells, how he acquired his knowledge. Abraham recounts how he found Abramelin the Mage living in the desert outside of an Egyptian town, Iraqi, which borders the Nile. Abraham's home sat atop a small hill surrounded by trees. He was an Egyptian mage and taught a powerful form of Kabbalistic magic to Abraham. He was a, venerably aged man, very courteous and kind, discussing only the fear of God, the importance of leading a well-regulated life, and the evils of the acquisition of riches and goods. The usual fare. Abramelin extracted a promise from Abraham that he would give up his false dogmas and live in the way and law of the Lord. He then gave Abraham 2 manuscript books to copy for himself, asking for 10 gold florins, which he took with the intention of distributing to 72 poor persons in Iraqi. Upon his return 15 days later, after having disposed of the payment money, Abramelin extracted an oath from Abraham to serve and fear the Lord, and to live and die in his most holy law. After this, Abraham was given the divine science and true magic embedded with the 2 manuscripts, which he was to follow and give to only those whom he knew well. The book exists in the form of 12 manuscripts and an early printed edition. The early manuscripts are 2 versions that date from around 1608, are written in German, while another 2 manuscripts date from about 1700 and 1750 respectively. The practical magic found in both Book 3 of the French text and Book 4 of the German original centers around a set of talismans composed of magical word squares. These are similar to traditional magic squares, though the latter are usually composed of numbers, while Abramelin's squares contain letters. Commonly, word squares are used as puzzles or as teaching aids for students. In this context, though, the focus becomes mystical, so that each square should contain words or names that relate to the magical goal of the square. A parallel is found in the famous Satyr Arepo Tenet opera Rotos word square, an altered version of which is also found among Abraham's squares. Curse book and math puzzles? Yeah, no thanks. In first place, we have Untitled Grimoires. I feel like that should be scary enough on its own, but time to elaborate. These manuscripts were believed to be written in the early 1900s, as their first library appearance was around the 1920s. The books originated when a Wiccan high priestess called Persephone Adrastea Irene recorded her family's spiritual history of being an American witch of Swedish and English ancestry. These manuscripts record Persephone's witchy history that she reworked all through her adult life, incorporating her mother's grimoire into them as well. Their first book contains around 250 pages of spells, incantations, curses, and enchantments, as well as corresponding information on gems, planets, rites, potions, and even exorcisms. The second book includes around 150 to 200 pages of alchemy and chemistry recipes, cures, perfumes and balms, nerve tonics, and even hairspray recipes. The first book is believed to carry the curse heavier than its counterpart, as Persephone's spells are believed in Wiccan culture to contain more power than most other records due to the embodiment of herself within them. Originally, the books belonged to Alice Montserrat, the wife of Israel Regardie, who moved to the UK in the 1920s to work with famous occult writer Aleister Crowley. Later on, they both went on to work with the Golden Dawn Order and printed their works and publications as occultism raised into the modern world. Although Montserrat did little reporting on the cursed lore over these books, she did make notes as to why she and others within the order believed the curse carried some serious weight. She made a note to an inscription warning all those who read it, saying, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further, or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hand of the craft." This was written in not only English, but other languages as well, to ensure the reader be heavily warned to keep away. To this day, copies of the Untitled Grimoires can be bought from M. Benjamin Catt's fine books. They still come with a high warning for all non-believers within Wiccan or pagan beliefs to shy away from them because of the cursed lore within and surrounding their pages. As tempting as it might be to acquire a copy, since that is a place I could technically travel to, I don't want to risk fate. My life's crazy enough.
Number 5 on this list is the Untitled Grimoires. The Untitled Grimoires were written by a witch, and really not the type of book that you want to be reading before bedtime. Or actually reading at all, for that matter. Digital Trends says, the Untitled Grimoires is a set of 2 handwritten, spiral-bound spell books sold by an online retailer for nearly $14,000 back in 2013. The books were handwritten in the 1960s by Persephone Adrasta Irene, a high priestess of Wicca who supposedly led her own coven. All 250 pages are filled with incantations, spells, enchantments, and details on how to summon spirits and demons. However, there was a serious catch. The seller warned buyers that any non-believers who messed with the books would bring a deadly curse upon themselves, while Persephone herself explicitly tells readers on the first page that proceeding with the book would have serious consequences. She wrote, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further, or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hand of the craft." So literally anyone who can't perform dark magic already can't read this book and learn how to perform dark magic without dark magic coming and cursing them. Seems like a kind of a stupid way to get people to join your club, but I guess I'm not familiar with the ongoings of witches. Either way, there is no doubt that this book is deeply cursed. I can't imagine spending 14 grand on this thing unless you literally were already familiar with dark magic yourself, and I guess then you could make use of the book, but that's not me. People who have tried to read this thing have had some horrible tragedies befall them, so I highly do not recommend it. Number 4 on this list is Pseudomarchia Daemonum. Wow, okay, that was an absolute freaking mouthful, so I'm not going to be calling it that anymore because it's also called the False Hierarchy of Demons, and I'm going to be saying that from here on out. Ancient Origins says this is a great compendium from the 16th century dictating the names of 69 demons. The list initially appeared as an appendix to a book about demonology and witchcraft by Johann Weyer. The son of a civic service merchant, Johann Weyer was a Dutch doctor and occult practitioner born in the Netherlands in 1515. Well versed in Latin from a young age, Weyer quickly became a student of Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa, a famous magician, theologian, and occultist in Antwerp. It appears that Weyer's fascination with magic began while working under Agrippa, but later escalated after he became a doctor in his own right. He was summoned to a particular fortune teller's court case and thereby asked by the judge for advice on the topic. The court case started his interest in researching the witchcraft way of life, culminating with his decision to attempt to defend those who were accused of practicing. 27 years after this case, when Weyer was 62 years old, he published The False Hierarchy of Demons. This book, as with most that study demons, also talks about how to summon and control these demons. This book also focuses a lot on witchcraft too, something that became a deep obsession for Weyer. Definitely a book that you should avoid, and one that could hold some serious curses. Number 3 on this list is the Ars Notoria. The Ars Notoria is an ancient text which grants the person who studies it a perfect memory. Something that sounds great from the outside, but it isn't as cool as it's cracked up to be. Ancient Origins writes, as part of a larger collection known as the Lesser Keys of Solomon, the Ars Notoria is a book that is said to allow followers a mastery of academia, giving them greater eloquence, a perfect memory, and wisdom. The Ars Notoria is one of 5 books within the Lesser Keys of Solomon, an anonymous text that was compiled from other works in the 17th century and focuses on demonology. The Ars Notoria is the oldest portion of the Lesser of the Keys grimoire, dating back to the 13th century. However, the texts contained within are a collection of orations, prayers, and magical words which date back to well before the 1200s. The prayers are in several languages including Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. It was not a book of spells or potions, but a book of prayers and orations that are said to strengthen and focus one's mental powers by beseeching God for intellectual gifts. Among these intellectual gifts is the concept of a perfect memory. Those who practice liberal arts such as arithmetic, geometry, and philosophy are promised a mastery of their subject if they devote themselves to the Ars Notoria. Within, it describes a daily process of visualization, contemplation, and orations intended to enhance the practitioner's focus and memory. So here's the thing, guys, that all sounds well and good and very useful, but I don't think that people understand what a perfect memory actually means. It means that there is literally nothing at any given point that you will ever forget. The license plate of that one car that cut you off, that one passing comment that the cashier said about the milk that you bought, the strange handshake that you had with your friend the other day. Literally nothing at all. You're not going to forget anything. Think about how much noise is going to be going on in your head at one given time if you can't forget anything. This is the curse of this book, and it's why a lot of people who have studied it in depth have lost their minds. If you're going to remember everything in the world, then there also needs to be a way to turn it off every now and again. to finally get some silence in your head. Sometimes forgetting things really is the best thing for us. Number 2 on this list is the Picatrix. The Picatrix is definitely a book that should be avoided, and it's mainly for how freaking grotesque it is. It was initially written in Arabic back in the 11th century, and it's a book that's centered around astrology and magic. It teaches the individuals who study it how to concoct crazy spells and make magical potions. What has thrust it into the limelight, as I mentioned earlier, is how freaking gross it is. The magical potions and the spells in here are just disgusting, and they're honestly plain wrong. Various body parts, various fluid from said body parts, and other weird stuff is regularly called upon in this text. The following is a literal passage from the book on how to make a spell. Take 4 ounces of the blood of a black dog, 2 ounces each of pig's blood and brains, and 1 ounce of donkey brains. Mix all of this together until well blended. When you give this medicine to someone in food or drink, he will hate you. And like, yeah, duh, if anyone blended up a bunch of brains and then gave it to me to drink, then I would kinda hate them as well. Many people think that this book is cursed based on the horrible spells in it, but it honestly might not be and could just be super weird. Either way, probably best to be avoided. And number 1 on this list is the Voynich Manuscript. The Voynich Manuscript is an illustrated codex that is handwritten in a writing system or language that no one understands. By using some advanced carbon dating, we can determine that it was made back in the early 15th century. We're pretty sure that based on the style of writing, artwork, and language that's in this book, it was most likely made in Italy. The manuscript contains 240 pages in it, and even though it was discovered a long time ago, no one has any idea what it truly means. This could be a good thing though, because the current prevailing wisdom is that whoever discovered exactly what this book says and means, they're gonna be cursed. Some think that this book has an ancient alien curse that's attached to it, and that it was dumped in Italy hundreds of years ago by said extraterrestrials. Others believe that there were some deep devil worshippers who made this book after finally making contact with the devil. Either way, so far we have no idea what it says, and if things maintain how they've been, we probably won't ever know. Which for a book like the Voynich Manuscript, might actually be for the best.
Written in the early 1600s by Martin de Leon Cardenas, The Orphan Story is a novel about a young Spaniard who heads to the Americas in search of fortune. While it may sound like a normal adventure story, and an outlier amongst the magical books I'm about to talk about today, a major darkness lurks within its pages that led to the novel not being published until 2018. The first draft was a 328-page manuscript that was slightly yellowed, a little bit worn, a little bit aged, missing a couple of pages. Which, on the surface sounds pretty tame, but you've got to assume otherwise if I'm making a point of it. It is handwritten in a decorative style reflective of the Golden or Imperial Age. I'm not super sure. The New Age print takes on a more modern bound look, featuring artwork from the original manuscript on the front, and a rather plain book front past that. Belinda Peliassos, a Peruvian scholar who edited the book for 2 years, says that she was warned by multiple people about this manuscript. It was first set to appear in 1621 under the pen name of Andres de Leon, but never made it to the press due to the presidential atmosphere at the time in Sicily. And if you know, you know. The manuscript then sat in the Hispanic Society of America until 1965 when Belinda rediscovered it. She learned about the many attempts to publish the story, giving rise to rumors that malevolent energy lurked among the pages, causing the people who worked on it to pass. In an interview, she commented on the reported deaths, saying one was from a strange disease, another in a car accident, and something else for the other. Belinda had also heard from other professors she was working with to publish the book, one who specialized in colonial letters from the Andean regions in Mexico, who was named Raquel Chang Rodriguez. Raquel's letters describe how Antonio Rodriguez Manino and William C. Bryant both died before finishing their editions of the book, and that's why the manuscript is believed to be cursed or bewitched. They told her that the book was cursed, and the reason it had taken them so long to publish that was, well, if you work on it, you're gonna die. In some sort of weird, mysterious way. Did the powers that be not want the ancient script out in the world? Note to self, don't go within 10 feet of the book. Not worth it. Here's an obvious inclusion into our list today, the Necronomicon. Look, I should get brownie points somewhere for holding out for a year before talking about this gem. Inspired by an H.P. Lovecraft story, this book was published in the 70s by an anonymous author, only identified by the pen name Simon, believed to actually be Peter Lavenda, but can't prove that. The first editions, of which I'm not kidding, only 666 copies were released, were bound in leather, but later on it would be published in paperback, becoming an immediate bestseller. In this version's prologue, Simon claims that this is no fictional book, but a translation of a Greek manuscript containing the Necronomicon. The introduction to the book, which is about 80 pages of the 263, is the only part that Simon claims were written. It relates how Simon and his associates were introduced to a Greek translation of the Necronomicon, I love saying that word, by a mysterious monk. Simon claims that after experimenting with the text, they verified that the work is a genuine collection of magical rituals that predates most known religions, and warns that anyone attempting to use this might unleash dangerous forces. In addition to an introduction, the book uses a frame story titled The Testimony of the Mad Arab. The testimony is in two parts, forming a prologue and an epilogue to the core. The author describes himself as, you guessed it, Mad Arab. I'll just call it Mad. The prologue explains how Mad first came to discover the dark secrets that he's recording, accidentally witnessing an arcane ritual performed by a cult that worships Tiamat, in which both the demons Cthulhu and Humwawa are conjured. In the epilogue, Mad is haunted by premonitions of his gruesome death. He realizes that the horrors of the Necronomicon are enraged and seek revenge upon him for revealing their existence to the world. He is unable to sign his work and thus remains nameless. This version mixes pseudo-Sumerian mythology with Lovecraft's universe, and it includes rituals that supposedly allow the reader to summon the gods and demons of these myths. It has also been linked to the Satanic Church, as it kind of alludes to Aleister Crowley's teachings, and if you know anything about that name, you'll understand why that's a name to be worried about being associated with anything. Ever heard of Tomino's Hell? Rather than a full book, bear with me here, it's a cursed poem included in Sakin, a poem compilation dating back to 1919 by a Japanese poet and songwriter. It tells the journey of a Tomino, a young boy who has been sent to hell after he committed an unforgivable sin. The poem later served as an inspiration for a film called Pastoral to Die in the Country. The filmmaker died 9 years later, and well, the poem was blamed for it. Since then, it has become an instant urban legend, suggesting that anybody who reads the poem will either die in a couple of days, or be haunted by Tomino's spirit. 6 one way, half a dozen the other, right? And finally for today, the Book of Soyga is an occult text that dates back to at least the 1500s. We only know about it because it was once owned by John Dee, a famous 16th century polymath whose fields of study and expertise included mathematics, physics, chemistry, and astronomy. Dee was also an occultist who was particularly interested in communicating with angels. This book must have been irresistible to him. Besides magical spells and writings about demonology and astrology, the text includes the names and genealogies of angels. Look, it's a nice change from the usual books of demons I hear about. Let me have this one. According to Benjamin Woolley's Dee biography, The Queen's Conjurer, Dee believed the book contained an ancient, even divine message written in the language originally spoken to Adam. In other words, the true unspoiled word of God. I know a lot of people who would love to see that. It also includes 36 cryptic tables that remained undeciphered for centuries. Dee attempted to crack their code with the help of Edward Kelly, a crystal gazer who convinced Dee he could channel the voices of angels. Kelly sometimes spelled his name by K-E-L-L-Y instead of being K-E-L-L-E-Y, or went by Edward Talbot. Having aliases was probably helpful to the supposed medium, who had reportedly been convicted of counterfeiting and might have had his ears cut off as punishment. According to Sky History, Dee was so eager to talk to angels that when Kelly told him the angels wanted the two men to swap wives for an evening as payment for celestial communication, Dee was like, heck yes. 9 months later, Theodore was born. Yeah, that's something you don't hear about every day. Using Kelly as a go-between, Dee dialed up the archangel Uriel and asked him if the Book of Soyga was a real deal. Uriel, speaking through Kelly, assured him that it was, but told him that only the archangel Michael was authorized to translate the tables, but he wasn't available, busy schedule or something. This exchange might be the source of the Book of Soyga's reputation as a cursed book, or as it is sometimes known, the book that kills. At one point, Dee mentioned to Uriel that he'd been told he'd die within 2.5 years if he ever read the encoded text. Uriel assured Dee that he'd live for more than 100 years. Dee died in 1608 at the age of 81. The book changed hands a couple of times before vanishing from historical record. Fast forward 300 years, summer of 1994, Deborah Harkness had just finished her doctoral dissertation and was browsing through the catalog at Oxford's Bodleian Library when she found a reference to the text in question. She had the book brought up and soon found herself staring at the holy grail of Dee's scholarship. The experience inspired her first novel, The Discovery of Witches, which kicked off a best-selling trilogy and has since been adapted for television, which, love to see it. In 1998, mathematician Jim Reeds cracked the code of its mysterious tables. Reeds discovered a pattern involving the frequency and position of certain letters in relation to the other letters, or in his words, a letter is obtained by counting a certain number of letters after the letter immediately above it in the table. Make of that what you will. Reeds came up with a set of mathematical formulae that allowed him to decipher the tables, each of which turned out to be based on a 6-letter code word. But we still don't know the meaning of those code words, or what messages the tables were meant to communicate, or if there even is one. Maybe someday.
Number 5. The Woman in Black. In Susan Hill's 1983 gothic horror novel, The Woman in Black, a lawyer named Arthur Kipps is called to a small town in England to settle the estate of Mrs. Alice Drablow, known as the Eel Marsh House. At Mrs. Drablow's funeral, he sees a mysterious woman in black who the local children seem equally concerned by. After some detective work and putting up with several appearances by the woman in black, Arthur discovers that she is the ghost of Mrs. Drablow's sister, Jeanette. She had a child out of wedlock who her sister adopted, but one day a carriage carrying the young boy sank in the marshes. Jeanette died soon after and began to haunt the house and the town as the Woman in Black, often appearing as a dark omen, meaning that the family that saw her would soon lose a child. The Woman in Black is a terrifying figure for both her tragic origin and the lengths she seems willing to go to for revenge. The story has been adapted for the stage, in the second longest running play in West End history, as well as a couple film adaptations, with the most recent one starring Daniel Radcliffe as Arthur. But it all started with one terrifying book. Here's an excerpt from the text for you to enjoy. The passage led only to 3 other bedrooms on either side, and one by one, regaining my nerve as I went, I opened them and looked inside each one. Nothing. Only heavy old furniture and empty unmade beds, and, in the rooms at the back of the house, moonlight. I reached the door at the very end of the passage. This was the door without a keyhole, the door I had been unable to open on my first visit. I had no idea what was beyond it, except the sound. It was coming from within that room. It was a sound of something bumping gently on the floor in a rhythmic sort of way. A familiar sort of sound, and yet one that I still could not exactly place. I steadied my now racing heart and reached for the door handle I knew to be locked. Then, from somewhere out of that howling darkness, came a cry to my ears, catapulting me back into the present and banishing all the courage I had summoned to reach for the locked door. I listened hard. Nothing. The tumult of the wind like a banshee, and the banging and rattling of the window in its old ill-fitting frame. Then yes, again, a cry. That familiar cry of desperation and anguish. A cry for help from a child somewhere out on the marsh. There was no child. I knew that. How could there be? Yet how could I stand here and ignore even the crying of some long-dead ghost? Rest in peace, I thought. But this poor one did not. Could not. After a few moments, I turned. I knew what I had to do. I would fetch the axe from downstairs and discover once and for all what was hiding in this locked room. As I ventured down the landing towards the stairs, Spider the dog following me at once, 2 things happened together. I had the impression of someone who had just that very second before gone past me on their way from the top of the stairs to one of the other rooms, and as a tremendous blast of wind hit the house so that it all but seemed to rock at the impact, the lights went out. I had not bothered to pick up my torch, and now I stood in the pitch blackness, unsure for a moment of my bearings. Number 4. Dracula. Dracula is such an enduring character in fiction to the point where he has become somewhat of a stock character, being parodied or diluted to the point where it can be difficult to remember how terrifying he really is. Appearing in the 1897 novel by Bram Stoker, Count Dracula is of course a vampire living in Transylvania who engages the services of a young solicitor named Jonathan Harker. The Count plans to make the move to England in order to find fresh prey, and is using Harker not only for the purpose of buying a home, but so that he can learn as much as he can about England before going. Because he has become the iconic vampire in the years since, it may surprise you to learn that he was a revolutionary new take on the creature when he was first created. Before Dracula's publication, vampires were usually portrayed as repulsive, corpse-like creatures, making the Count's handsomeness, as well as his veneer of charm and sophistication, all the more terrifying, as he could pass almost undetected and charm his way into your home in a way that classic vampires couldn't. In addition to his blood-sucking, Dracula possesses super strength equivalent to 20 men, the ability to cast hypnotic or illusionary spells. He can vanish and reappear at will, can command animals like bats, rats, and wolves, as well as transform into such creatures. As a vampire, he is of course very difficult to defeat, being unable to go into the sun without losing his powers. However, unlike later versions, the sun does not burn him to ash. He is defeated in the end of the novel by being decapitated by a knife, not by having a stake driven through his heart as you may assume. Here's an excerpt from Dracula, where the Count interrupts his brides from feeding on Jonathan. I was conscious of the presence of the Count, and of his being as I lapped in a storm of fury. As my eyes opened involuntarily, I saw his strong hand grasp the slender neck of the fair woman, and with a giant's power draw it back. The blue eyes transformed with fury, the white teeth champing with rage, and the fair cheeks blazing red with passion. But the Count account. Never did I imagine such wrath and fury, even to the demons of the pit. His eyes were positively blazing. The red light in them was lurid, as if the flames of hellfire blazed behind them. His face was deathly pale, and the lines of it were hard like drawn wires. The thick eyebrows that met over the nose now seemed like a heaving bar of white-hot metal. With a fierce sweep of his arm, he hurled the woman from him, and then motioned to the others as though he were beating them back. It was the same imperious gesture that I had seen used to the wolves. In a voice which, though low and almost in a whisper, seemed to cut through the air and then ring round the room, he said, "How dare you touch him, any of you? How dare you cast eyes on him when I had forbidden it? Back, I tell you all, this man belongs to me. Beware how you meddle with him, or you'll have to deal with me." "Are we to have nothing tonight?" said one of them in a low laugh, as she pointed to the bag which he had thrown upon the floor, and which moved as though there was some living thing within it. For answer, he nodded his head. One of the women jumped forward and opened it. If my ears did not deceive me, there was a gasp and a low wail, as of a half-smothered child. The woman closed round whilst I was aghast with horror, but as I looked they disappeared, and with them the dreadful bag. Number 3. Cthulhu. First appearing in a 1928 short story by H.P. Lovecraft, featured in the Weird Tales pulp magazine, in Call of Cthulhu, we learn that the creature is a malevolent entity who is imprisoned in hibernation in an underwater city in the South Pacific. He is the object of worship for many other Lovecraftian monsters, as well as the human cults appearing in his stories. He is said to be the source of constant subconscious anxiety for all of mankind, which, if true, makes me have a real bone or two to pick with this entity. Although currently trapped in hibernation, it is only a matter of time before he returns to claim the souls of humanity and reawaken the other great old ones, at which point he will reclaim the universe. The sight of the creature is enough to drive a man to madness, but descriptions are given by Lovecraft in the following passage from Call of Cthulhu. The thing cannot be described. There is no language for such abysms of shrieking and immemorial lunacy, such eldritch contradictions of all matter, force, and cosmic order. A mountain walked or stumbled. It seemed to be a sort of monster, or symbol representing a monster, of a form which only a diseased fancy could conceive. If I say that my somewhat extravagant imagination yielded simultaneous pictures of an octopus, a dragon, and a human caricature, I shall not be unfaithful to the spirit of the thing. A pulpy, tentacled head surmounted a grotesque and scaly body with rudimentary wings, but it was the general outline of the whole which made it most shockingly frightful. Number 2. The Headless Horseman. Variations of the Headless Horseman have appeared many times over the years, such as the demonic fairy in Irish myth known as the Dullahan, and is also similar to the elements from the Arthurian legend Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. But the version we will be looking at today is the Headless Horseman who appears in the 1820 short story The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. The Headless Horseman is said to be a Hessian trooper from the Revolutionary War whose head was taken off by a cannonball. He then began haunting the woods, looking for his head and attacking unsuspecting travelers. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow tells of Ichabod Crane, a schoolteacher trying to woo a farm girl at a party who comes across the horseman on his way home. The story is slightly ambiguous about whether the horseman is real or if it is Ichabod's romantic rival in disguise, but either way, the horseman has become an enduring figure in American literature. Here is a passage from the short story. It was the witching time of night when Ichabod traveled homeward. All the ghost stories that he had ever heard over the years now came crowding upon his recollection. The night grew darker. The stars seemed to sink deeper in the sky. He had never felt so lonely. A splash by the side of a bridge caught his ear. In the dark shadow, he beheld something huge, misshapen, black and towering. The hair rose upon his head. He stammered, "Who are you?" He received no reply. The shadowy object put itself in motion and bounded into the middle of the road. It appeared to be a horseman of large dimensions, mounted on a black horse of powerful frame. Ichabod quickened his steed in hopes of leaving the mysterious horseman behind. The stranger, however, quickened to an equal pace. The odd silence of Ichabod's companion was soon fearfully accounted for upon seeing his fellow traveler in relief against the sky, gigantic in height, and muffled in a cloak, Ichabod was horror-struck to perceive that he was headless, and that he carried his head before him on his saddle. In desperation, Ichabod rained kicks upon gunpowder. The spectre followed close behind. Away they dashed, stones flying. An opening in the trees now cheered him with the hope that the church bridge was at hand, the place where legend said the horseman should stop. Ichabod cast a look behind to see if his pursuer would vanish. Instead, he saw the goblin rising up in his stirrups, in the very act of hurling his head at him. Ichabod Ichabod tried to dodge the horrible missile, but too late. It encountered his cranium with a tremendous crash. He tumbled into the dust, and gunpowder and the goblin rider passed by like a whirlwind. The next morning, the old horse was found quietly cropping grass at his master's gate. The students were assembled at the schoolhouse, but no schoolmaster arrived. The tracks of horses' hoofs, dented in the road, were traced to the bridge. On the bank was found the hat of the unfortunate Ichabod, and close behind it, a shattered pumpkin. Number 1. It. The title antagonist of Stephen King's 1986 novel It is one of the most terrifying he's ever come up with, and that's saying a lot considering his output. It is an ancient evil, trans-dimensional entity that attacks the children of Derry, Maine every 27 years before hibernating until the next cycle. It has reality-altering powers, being able to change its victim's surroundings as well as its own appearance in order to take the shape of whatever its victim is most afraid of. Its true form is described as being similar to that of a giant spider, and it takes the forms of a few different creatures, such as a wolfman, a leper, and even a swarm of flying leeches, but one of its favorite forms to assume is that of Pennywise the dancing clown. In the following passage from the novel, one of the children, Ben, comes across Pennywise for the first time. The balloons still appeared to be floating towards him. It had to be a hallucination or a mirage brought on by some weird trick of the weather. There could be a man down there on the ice. He supposed it was even possible that he could be wearing a clown suit, but the balloons couldn't be floating towards Ben into the wind, yet that was just what they appeared to be doing. Ben! The clown on the ice called. Ben thought that voice was only in his mind, although it seemed to be heard with his ears. Want a balloon, Ben? There was something so evil in that voice, so awful, that Ben wanted to run away as fast as he could, but his feet seemed as welded to the sidewalk as the teeter-totters in the schoolyard were to the ground. They float, Ben! They all float. Try one and see. The clown began walking along the ice towards Canal Bridge where Ben stood. Ben watched him come, not moving. He watched as a bird watches an approaching snake. The balloons should have burst in the intense cold, but they did not. They floated above and ahead of the clown when they should have been streaming out behind him, trying to escape back into the barrens, where some part of Ben's mind assured him this creature had come from in the first place. Now Ben noticed something else. Although the last of daylight had struck a rosy glow across the ice of the canal, the clown cast no shadow. None at all.
In 5th place, we have the Lesser Key of Solomon, also known as Lemegeton Clavicula Salomonis, or simply Lemegeton. This is probably the book on this list that I'm personally most familiar with. I've definitely referenced it more than once for y'all, since it has some great info on demons and their personalities. For simplicity's sake, I'll just refer to it as the Key today. The Key is an anonymously authored grimoire on demonology that was compiled in the mid-17th century, mostly from materials up to 7 centuries older. It's divided into 5 books: Ars Goetia, Ars Thirgia Goetia, Ars Paulina, Ars Almadel, and Ars Notoria. The Key is based on the Testament of Solomon and the ring mentioned within it that he uses to seal demons. While most of us know specifically the Ars Goetia for, the 72 demons listed in the ranking, and I promise I'll get to the highlight reel in a moment. Now, while I don't have a technical definition for Ars, the Latin term Goetia refers to the evocation of demons or evil spirits, and is derived from an ancient Greek word meaning charm, witchcraft, or jugglery. In medieval and Renaissance Europe, Goetia was generally considered evil and heretical, in contrast to Theurgia and Magia Naturalis, or natural magic, which were sometimes considered more noble. Okay, the 72 demons I promised. I promise I won't bore y'all and list them all, but some notable ones include King Baal, Duke Valfor, King Baleth, Duke Berith, Duke Astaroth, King Asmodeus, King or Count Fine, and Samael. The Ars Thirgia Goetia mostly references Trithemius's Steganographia, though the seals and order of the spirits are different due to corrupted transmission via manuscript. Rituals not found in Stenographia were added, and in some ways conflicting with similar rituals found in the Ars Goetia and Ars Paulina. Most of the spirits summoned are tied to compass points. 4 emperors are tied to the cardinal points of Carnisiel in the east, Amenadiel in the west, Demoriel in the north, and Caspiel in the south. And 16 dukes are tied to cardinal points, intercardinal points, and additional directions between those. There are in addition 11 wandering princes, so that a total of 31 spirit leaders each rule between several to a few dozen spirits. The Ars Paulina is derived from Book 3 of Prometheus's Stenographia and from portions of the Heptameron, but delivered by Paul the Apostle. Elements from the magical calendar, astrological seals by Robert Turner's 1656 translation of Paracelsus's Archidoxes of Magic, and the year 1641 indicate that this portion was written in the later half of the 17th century. Traditions of Paul communicating with heavenly powers are almost as old as Christianity itself, as seen in some interpretations of Corinthians and the apocryphal Apocalypse of Paul. Now, the Ars Paulina is divided into 2 books, the first detailing 24 angels aligned with the 24 hours of the day, while the second detailing the 360 spirits of the degrees of the zodiac. The Ars Amadel instructs the magician on how to create a wax tablet with specific designs intended to contact angels via scrying. And finally, the Ars Notoria contains a series of prayers intended to grant eidetic memory and instantaneous learning to the magician. Pretty dang thorough. In fourth place, we have the Grand Grimoire. It's a black magic grimoire, and for reference, a grimoire is a textbook of magic that typically, includes instructions on how to create magical objects like talismans and amulets, how to perform magical spells, charms and divination, and how to summon or invoke supernatural entities such as angels, spirits, deities, and demons. In many cases, the books themselves are believed to be imbued with magical powers, although in many cultures, other sacred texts that are not grimoires, such as the Bible, have been believed to have supernatural properties intrinsically. Now, the only contents found in a grimoire would be information on spells, rituals, the preparation of magical tools, a list of ingredients, and their magical correspondences. In this manner, while all books on magic could be thought of as grimoires, not all magical books should be thought of as grimoires. Different editions date the specific one to 1521, 1522, or 1421, but it was probably written during the early 19th century. Some experts suggest that 1702 is when the first edition may have been created, and a Bibliothèque Bleue version, similar to a chapter book, of the text may have been published in 1750. Now, the introductory chapter was authored by Antonia Venetiana del Rabina, who gathered his information from the original writings of King Solomon. Much of the material of this grimoire derives from the Key of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon, which, our grimoire is attributed to King Solomon. Also known as Le Dragon Rouge, or the Red Dragon, this book contains instructions on how to summon Lucifer, or Lucifege Rofocal, for the purpose of forming a deal with the devil. The 19th century French occultist Eliphas Lévy, author of Dogmes et Rituels de la Haute Magie, claimed the contemporary edition of Le Dragon Rouge was a counterfeit of a true older Grand Grimoire. Gosh, I love petty historical spats. Now, the overall work is divided into two books. The first book contains instructions for summoning a demon and for the construction of tools with which to force the demon to do one's bidding. The second book is divided further into two more parts: the Sanctum Regnum and Secrets de l'Art Magique du Grand Grimoire. The Sanctum Regnum contains instructions for making a pact with the demon, allowing one to command the spirit without the tools required by Book 1, but at greater risk. Secrets contains simple spells and rituals one can employ after having performed the ritual of the first book. Some editions contain a short text between these two parts, known as Le Secret Magique ou Le Grand Art de pouvoir parler aux morts, or in English, The Magic Secret or the Grand Art of Being Able to Speak with the Dead, which deals with necromancy. The book describes several demons as well as the rituals to summon them in order to make a pact with them. It also details several spells for winning a lottery, talking to spirits, being loved by a girl, making oneself invisible, and more. This book mentions the three greater demons, which are similarly prioritized in the Grimmorium Verum. Sidebar: in the English translation of the work, the demons are referred to by the more generic term of spirits, which is a term I know some modern Satanists tend to prefer. The demons that are mentioned are the Emperor Lucifer, Prince Beelzebub, and Grand Duke Astaroth. Now, this work also makes mention of 6 lesser demons, and of course I'll mention them all. Lucifege Rofocal, Prime Minister; Satan Nachia, Commander-in-Chief; Agliarept, Commandant; Fleurity, Lieutenant General; Sargatanas, Brigadier Major; Nebulos, Marshal, and Inspector General. In third place, we have the complete book of Demonolatry. Written by S. Connolly, it boasts telling the reader how to discover powerful rites, magic, and practices that honor Satan and the demons. Now, this text, used by the traditional Demonolatry priesthood to train members of their covens, is part workbook, part textbook, and part reference book. It includes thorough chapters on demonology, history, demonic holy days, offerings, prayers, sigils, religious rites, and an introduction to demonolatry magic. Okay, this might be the first book I'm actually tempted to buy for myself, if only just to learn more about demonology history from someone that isn't Ed Warren for once. I love the Warrens and their work, but at the same time, it would be kind of neat to learn from a lens that isn't, as biased in Catholicism. Let's see what else it advertises. Learn how and why the ends, demonolatry sigils, ascension, and many other demonolatry methods have become standard practice among many theistic Satanists. It claims to guide students from pre-initiate to adept. It even delves into the depths of demonolatry, sex magic, necromancy, scarlet elixir rites, and red fluid sacrifice. See, that entire last phrase I can do without. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. Should I bother investing in it or not? In second place, we have the Grimmorium Verum. The Grimmorium Verum, which is Latin for true grimoire, is an 18th century grimoire attributed to one Alabek the Egyptian of Memphis, who wrote it in 1517. Like many grimoires, yep, it claims a tradition originating with King Solomon. The grimoire is not a translation of an earlier work, with its original appearing in French or Italian in the mid-18th century, as noted already by A.E. Waite, who discussed the work in his book of ceremonial magic in 1911, stating that the date specified in the title of Grimmorium Verum is undeniably fraudulent. equivalent, since the work belongs to the middle of the 18th century and Memphis is Rome. Alrighty. One version of the grimoire was included as the Clavicles of King Solomon, Book 3, in one of the French manuscripts S. L. McGregor Mathers incorporated in his version of the Key of Solomon, but it was omitted from the key with his explanation. That apparently at the end there are some short extracts from the Grimmorium Verum with the seals of evil spirits, which, as they do not belong to the Key of Solomon proper, I have not given. For the evident classification of the key is in 2 books and no more. I just love feuds. H.R. Shaw also published some of it in The Secret Lore of Magic, the Book of Sorcerers in 1957. Alrighty, time to break down all 4 books. So book 1 is described as concerning the character of demons, particularly the superior spirits of Lucifer, Beelzebub, Astaroth, while also including the many inferior spirits below them and their invoking sigils. Who wants to hear about what all the lesser spirits can do? Klonek has the power to bring money to those who make a pact with him. Lucisin has power over important people and politicians. Frymost has power over women. Kleppoth can help you experience all sorts of dreams and visions. Kill can manifest dramatic situations and changes. Mersild has dominion over long and short distance travel. Clisthert can create confusion or enlightenment, depending on what you need. Serchade can make you see all sorts of natural and supernatural creatures. Hickpath can make a person think of you, no matter how far or distant they may be. Humans can bring you any book you desire. Seagal will cause all sorts of prodigies to appear. Brucissier can teach you the art of necromancy. Gouland causes all illnesses. Surgat can create every kind of opportunity for advancement. Montreal can help you move about unseen. Fruitimier prepares all kinds of feasts for you. Huigi Tigras, I tried, causes sleep in the case of some and insomnia in others. Tempting. I could use a good night's sleep. Book 2 is simply described as being of planetary hours, so I'll leave that up to y'all to interpret what you think it means. Book 3 is the preparation of the operator, or more simply put, how to prepare for summoning. A more modern title could be, Demon Summoning for Dummies, or How to Summon a Demon 101. Just saying. Book 4 contains the Sanctum Regnum, called the Royalty of Spirits, or the Little Key of Solomon, a most learned Hebraic necromancer and rabbi. Gee, where have I referenced that before? This book contains various combinations of characters where the powers can be invoked or brought forth whensoever you may wish, each according to his faculty. Long story short, it's a very descriptive and thorough demon summoning Bible, if you will. Once again, I personally do not recommend summoning demons, but if you really feel like you must, this feels like it would produce safer outcomes than, say, a random YouTube ritual or Ouija board. Okay, anything's better than a cursed board, but this one I feel like I can kind of endorse and still sleep at night, you know? In first place, we have the Munich Manual of Demonic Magic. The MMDM, or Libel Incantionum, Exorcismorium et Fascinatorium Variarium, is a 15th century grimoire manuscript. The text, composed in Latin, is largely concerned with demonology and necromancy. Richard Kiekefer edited the text of the manuscript in 1998 under the title Forbidden Rites, a necromancer's manual of the 15th century. Portions of the text in English translation are presented in Forbidden Rites as well, embedded within the author's essays and explanations on the Munich Manual in specific and grimoires in general. The Russian translation of this Latin grimoire was published in 2019, while the first English translation was published in only 2023. There was only one known surviving manuscript of the original Munich Manual, which is almost complete, except for the first 2 folios that describe the beginning of the first ritual. The rest of the grimoire contains complete instructions for the invocation of demons, such as Satan, Lilith, Astaroth, and Samael, as well as the supposed attainment of favors and supernatural powers from them. Some of the spells allow for obtaining the love of a woman, achieving invisibility, acquiring wealth and treasures, or gaining knowledge. The text is accompanied by over 40 illustrations of magic circles and symbols to be used in the ritual. Pages 130 to 133 of the text include a list of 11 demons, similar to the one from the Ars Goetia. Since there are only 11, I suppose I could list them all off. Count/Duke Barbarus, Duke Cassin, President/Count Odious, King Cursin, Duke Alugor, Prince Teob, President Fulak, Duke Ganeron, Marquis Tuvaris, and President Hani. Oh, and Marquis Sukax. I promise I did my best with pronunciations. Most of the text is in Latin, with the exception of 2 appended materials in German and Italian. Makes sense to me. Anyone feel like learning a dead language?
Number 5. The Great Omar. The Great Omar was a one-of-a-kind, tailor-made collection of Omar Khayyam's poetry. So if you're looking to score this at your local Barnes & Noble, you might have a bit of trouble. It was commissioned by the owner of a British bookshop, whose sole request was that it would be the greatest modern binding in the world. You know, nothing too lofty though. The book itself is made of 5,000 pieces of leather, 1,000 different gemstones, 100 square feet of gold, and some pages too, I guess. I think there's poetry inside there. The final book was priced for roughly $150,000 after finishing. So it's a pretty expensive book. But what makes it so cursed? Well, when the Great Omar was purchased, it was bought by an American buyer and had to take a transatlantic trip on a little ship called the Titanic, a boat which, as far as I know, has never been involved in any sort of historical events of note whatsoever. The Great Omar was never recovered from the wreckage and sank with the ship. 10 weeks after the book kissed the ocean floor, the man who bound it, Francis Sangorsky, drowned while on vacation at only the age of 37. A little suspicious, isn't it? A bookbinder in the 1930s tried to recreate the Great Omar, Stanley Bray. He finished the second iteration just in time for World War II to begin. The book was placed in a vault on London's Fore Street, which was one of the first sites to be bombed. I guess they heard about the book. The safe that held the book endured through the Blitz, but the safe's contents and the second Great Omar was incinerated and lost to the war. A third version has been crafted and is currently being held in a vault in the British Library, although given the book's history, I don't feel like I would be too comfortable spending any time around it if I didn't have to. Hey, liking what we do here at Top 5 Scary? Well, we always love a little subscribe. Toss one our way. Number 4, The Grand Grimoire. Another book you're probably gonna have some trouble finding on Amazon. The Grand Grimoire is a tome of black magic. No one can agree on when the grimoire was originally birthed into this world, with people claiming that it could have been written anywhere from the 15th century to the 19th century. No one knows who even wrote the Grand Grimoire. Perhaps it merely appeared one day from another world, tantalizing and asking to be read. Some urban legends claim that the book was written by a man possessed by the devil himself, acting as a vessel for his will to pen his musings. The book itself contains instructions for would-be warlocks to summon all manner of demons and sinister servants of the underworld, even including guides on how a fledgling necromancer could learn how to raise a spirit from the dead. Now, if all that sounds appealing to you, it's said that even so much as cracking the spine of the Grand Grimoire is enough to seal your soul to damnation, the literary equivalent of promising your soul to the underworld. The church, obviously, sought out to quell the rising threat of the Grand Grimoire's dark musings, and it is said that the original Grand Grimoire, gosh, that is fun to say, is currently being held sealed in the Vatican's legendary vault, where it shall never again be seen by prying eyes, or those wishing to uncover its many dark secrets. There are alleged excerpts that have been reprinted and made available, but the full Grand Grimoire itself hasn't been seen by anyone in what would be centuries. Perhaps for good reason too. I mean, if the myths and legends around the book are to be believed. Number 3, The Book of Abramelin. The Book of Abramelin, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm sure one of you ghouls and goblins will let me know, or the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, if you're not into that whole brevity thing, is an allegedly magic text that is thought to have been written at some point during the 14th century. It wasn't until the 19th century that it became recognized for its power, when the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn translated the book into English in the late 1890s. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and you're wondering which Final Fantasy that's from, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was a secret society devoted to the study of the occult and spiritual development. From here, the book became a key text in occultism, supposedly even inspiring Aleister Crowley's system of magic. So what's inside the book? Any pop-ups? The book centers around an incredibly elaborate ritual aimed at allowing a practicing sorcerer to communicate with their holy guardian angel. The book theorizing that everyone has their own personal guardian angel, a celestial other half from another world, if you will. After the sorcerer summons their guardian angel and enjoys a honeymoon phase, the book describes a period of blissful intimacy, one needs to conquer every unredeemed spirit of the infernal regions, which sounds like a bit of a task. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of unredeemed spirit. Luckily, I think the angel helps out a bit. If the legends are true, then undoubtedly the information in this book isn't the kind of thing that should ever be falling into the wrong hands. I mean, that's just a general good piece of life advice. As a general rule of thumb, you shouldn't mess with demons unless you know what you're doing, okay? That's the kind of thing to leave up to professionals. For all of our sakes, you know? Number 2, The Voynich Manuscript. The Voynich Manuscript is one of the more interesting books on this list. It's named after the first public owner of it, Wilfrid Voynich. Unlike most of these cursed banned books, the Voynich Manuscript is actually something you can seek out and read via Yale University's online collection, and you are more than welcome to peer over its pages, although you might find it a bit of a difficult text to read, because the Voynich Manuscript is written in a language that no human being speaks or has ever spoken. Carbon dating suggests the manuscript was first written at some unspecified time during the 14th century, and all 240 of the manuscript's pages are written completely unintelligibly, so if you want to take a look at this thing and try and help us crack this, please be my guest. Adorning its pages are confusing illustrations that only serve to further its mysterious reputation, with most of the drawings looking like a cross between a Hieronymus Bosch painting and a fever dream kaleidoscope nightmare. The book has made its way through countless owners, a succession of kings and other powerful leaders, and yet in all the years of its existence, no one has even come remotely close to understanding just what the Voynich Manuscript is, where it came from, and what its purpose is. Is it cursed? Well, it's possible. Maybe it contains the instructions for all manner of demonic and occult magic and we just don't know how to read it yet. There are some people who believe that the Voynich Manuscript could have been written by an extraterrestrial entity and gifted to us. And there's even some legends that claim the manuscript has some sort of apocalyptic curse hidden inside its mysterious scrawlings. We might never know, unless you might be the one to crack it for us. Number 1. Codex Gigas. Codex Gigas? Gigas? One of you guys will tell me, I'm sure. Oft referred to as the Devil's Bible, is the biggest entry on this list. And not just for its renown. No, it's like literally the biggest entry on this list. It's 3 feet tall and weighs around 80 pounds. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the curse this book inflicts on you is a hernia. The Codex Gigas, which literally translates to giant book, is a medieval manuscript dating back to the 12th century. So what's the deal with the Codex Gigas? Well, legends tell the Codex was penned by a monk who had broken his vows, and to repent for his sins, he was sentenced to be walled up alive. He promised, as an apology, that he would write a powerful book to glorify the monastery, and his book would contain all known human knowledge at that point. Everything. The original Wikipedia, and he wasn't even asking for donations. The legend continues that the monk, realizing that this task was a bit lofty, even for the quickest of scribes, reached out for some help co-authoring his mighty manuscript. He reached out and prayed, but not from God, but instead from Lucifer, asking for help finishing the book in exchange for his eternal soul. I'm starting to understand why he was sentenced for breaking his vows. Not really the best plan if you're looking to redeem yourself in the eyes of the church by making a deal with the devil, but hey, we've all done pretty crazy things trying to make a deadline, I totally get it. It's said that Lucifer himself helped complete the book, and the monk drew a portrait of the devil himself as thanks. That's where the book gets its name, the Devil's Bible. The book is replete with occultism, dark rituals, and imagery. I mean, after all, it's said to contain the entirety of the knowledge of the human race up to this point. So who's to speak what sort of sinister secrets are kept between its giant pages? There were estimates and tests to try and recreate the manuscript, suggesting that even one man writing, without illustrations, would have taken the better part of 2 decades to write the calligraphy present inside that book. So did this monk have some otherworldly help? Maybe just a huge stack of Red Bull? And what is inside this book? If your Latin's any good, the manuscript is kept on display in the National Library of Stockholm. Just be careful what you read. You got no idea what you could bring into this world.